Yo, alright, we alright, so I just saw this video, it caught my attention. No, it's not there anymore. Alright, well, hey buddy. Alright, so, this was actually it. Physics in the Dark, searching for the universe's missing matter. That's a little contradictory. I might give up a little bit too much about my facial detection. I'm down to look at this one right here. Fundamental lessons from string theory. Alright, so let's check this out. Kumun Vafa. I've heard about him, listened to him. Speaks really well. Let's get into what the fundamental lessons are. What is a fundamental lesson of string theory? What can that even be?
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about fundamental lessons that we have learned about string theory.
There we go. Can we hear it? Yeah.
So the first part of my talk is going to be
Hey, buddy.
introducing
Kumrun, nice to meet you. You didn't even introduce yourself.
ideas.
Wow.
So string theory, as you may have heard, is a theory
What's
which
at
has been
WSU?
pursued for about 45 years now as a fundamental theory of everything. Now that's a big undertaking. So
Theory of
clearly
everything,
we cannot
45
achieve
years
everything.
ago. I'm not even that old yet.
Even if we limit ourselves just to the fundamental questions,
young and it just showed up.
very in a complete, detailed form, and that's the
This
case
is wild.
for us today for string theory.
I am asking
We have
these
learned a
tough
lot of
questions.
things about string theory in the past 45 years, but a lot we haven't
And
understood.
the problem is, when I ask these
It is the most
questions, you
promising
guys just
candidate we
try to
have,
dig up more BS
for unifying
to prove that it
Einstein's
was
theory
like
of
at some point
relativity,
something that you held info
which
and
is the theory of
research that they
gravity
had their
with quantum
papers.
mechanics. So these two particular important
Theory
pillars
of gravity, yes, I'm
of
speaking
modern
over you. I
physics.
apologize, sir.
And the basic idea in it is that you have to replace basic particles, point particles, elementary particles like quark, by extended objects like strings.
Like strings.
That's why it's called string theory.
You have to combine extended
but these
things
happen
like
at very, very
strings.
tiny scales. In other words, from far away distance, this loop might look just like this point. But if you zoom in to about a scale of about 10 to the minus 30 centimeters, then these particles might have some extended features like this
Nope,
string
I
or
think that
membrane
this
or
is
some such
actually
things.
really
And this is
a little bit controversial.
why we call it string theory. The importance
Theory,
of replacing
yeah.
elementary particles by these string-like excitations or string-like configurations.
String-like configurations
So, for example,
to
here is
connect.
depicted a quark inside the nucleus,
What if we do
which
that
can be
with-
viewed as
oh
a string
my
if we kind
goodness.
of have a magnifying glass and look at it.
I do have magnifying glass. I'm
And
going
the
to
basic
say
process
because I don't want you
is
guys to
for the
know.
strings, in terms of producing new strings or
Yes,
interacting the strings,
producing new
combining,
strings, joining new
coming
strings.
along and combining into another string in a very nice form. In this way, you see two strings joining, and the opposite process would have given you a string splitting to two strings. And this underlines all possible interactions that we could, in principle, envision. And in some sense, it's a very nice way to unify all these particles and forces into one object. The particles are unified just to strings and all its vibrational modes. And the interaction is all captured by the simple process of strings coming and joining and forming new strings. But it's too early to
Forming
present
new
the final
strings.
formulation of string theory.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
work in
Sorry,
progress.
I apologize.
And work in progress implies
Oh yeah,
working
you
in
guys
this
are just
context.
showing this up right
And
now.
computers sometimes blackboards.
Oh wait, no. So I can
And
add to
experiments,
this.
unfortunately, can't help. At least not yet. And the problem is that the string, the size of the string is about a trillion times too small
3.
to be measured or to be experimentally measured by the energies that we have available in the colliders today. So it's very difficult to actually zoom in and give the pictures I was drawing. So
Yeah,
therefore,
because
we don't
I'm
have,
talking from far
the
away. You gotta
luxury
call
of
me
using
and contact
experiments
me,
to
and we can
guide
get
us
in this.
in building our theory.
Yes. Oh, you guys want to help me build your theory?
So, and in particular, as I said, we have no
You want me to
experimental
just keep
evidence of
calling
string
you
theory
out?
to date.
You want me to just keep calling you out? How many videos do I have to watch,
However,
sir?
it turns out that even the incomplete knowledge of string theory gives us a lot of
Time
new
to talk
principles of physics.
and waste
It
resources.
revolutionizes
But
a
I'm
lot
having
of things
fun.
we know about physics, even though we are far from the complete theory.
No, I have it.
And my aim is to try to give
Philosopher
some
Chris
sense of
Payne.
these new principles by guiding through some examples.
Guiding through some examples.
So,
All right,
it's
interesting.
going to
Of
be,
what?
Of
Relevancy?
course, difficult to describe all the things we have learned in string theory in one talk, but I'll try to at least take you through the tour of some highlights of some of the important ones that we have learned.
Not the fundamentals?
And so this picture is just to
Like, where do you begin?
illustrate that I'm going to be talking about the parts under the lamppost clearly. I'm not going to talk about far away in the dark, which we still don't know.
Far away in the dark, me.
But even what I'm going to tell you, even under the lamppost,
Or
there's
is
a
this
huge
what-
amount we have learned, and that's what I want to convey.
What
But
do you-
before I even start with string theory, I want to go back,
Oh my goodness.
step back, and talk
yes,
about some
because I'm
historical
talking
lessons
with you
we have
still. I'm
learned
sorry.
through the history of physics itself.
Where's the
And in
history of
particular, I
physics?
want to emphasize the fact that the development of physics and the new idea of physics comes always by giving up something we thought was fundamental and absolutely correct.
Yes.
Something which we did not suspect can be false.
Interesting. This is
This
what you
has
say?
happened again and again in physics, and as I will illustrate, string theory continues that tradition.
No.
In that we have to give up a number of principles that we thought are sacred.
Where are you coming from with that?
For example, let's go back and remind ourselves that at some point Earth was viewed as the center of the universe.
No.
Now, in fact,
Are you?
the
Yes,
Greeks
yes,
were,
we are.
very, very smart in recognizing, first of all, the fact that Earth was round, it's a globe,
What?
and they viewed, nevertheless, that the Earth is at the center of the universe. Okay? They didn't question that fact. Why not? It should be at the center of the universe.
No, it never was, fuckers. You guys got corrupt
Well, they
everything, and
didn't
you're doing
probably
it
have
now.
This picture, but anyhow, they had the picture of some kind of a globe. And in fact, not only they had this idea that Earth is the center of the universe, they used it to argue why Earth is not moving. They thought Earth is not moving.
Oh, wow.
So they wanted to explain why the Earth was stationary. And they had a very clever idea. They said, look, this is at the center of the universe, and if it were to move in any direction, it would break the fact that it's symmetric right at the center. So if it goes that way, you say, oh, no, it's not center anymore. You have lost the center, so it's not going to move. That was the
The
argument.
sun is the
for
center of
Greeks
our
that
solar
the center-
system.
The universe, that not only we are at the center, but we are stationary.
Of our
So they
universe?
use the symmetry principle to argue why we are not going to be moving. The Earth is stationary. Now, of course, we recognize that this is a false statement because we know Earth is moving and so on, but what I wanted to point out here is the clever use of symmetry argument they used to try to convey a physical fact that they thought was true.
Fuck
But
you.
actually, they were really smart. In fact, Aristotle disagreed with this reasoning. And in fact, he said, yes, of course, Earth is at the center, but this does not necessarily mean that because of symmetry it cannot go anywhere, because symmetry can be broken spontaneously. And he illustrated this by a very simple idea. He said, well, suppose you have a circle, and you have somebody at the center of the circle, symmetric like Earth or whatever, and you distribute food
All right. I just felt really uncomfortable. They were revealing a lot of good things in my theory, so it's just interesting. Not even good things, good topics.
With Fundrise, the real estate investments that powered the world's largest portfolios for decades are now in the palm of your hand.
Another non-philosopher that may be considered a philosopher, since we're talking about reality, is Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism. What are your thoughts on her sense of taking this idea of reality, calling her philosophy objectivism, and kind of starting at the idea that you really could know everything, and it's pretty obvious, and then from that you can derive an ethics about how to live life, like what is the good ethical life and all the virtue of selfishness, all that kind of stuff. So you talked to a lot of academic philosophers, so I'd be curious to see from the perspective of like, is she somebody that's taken seriously at all? Why is she dismissed, as I see from my distant perspective, by serious philosophers? And also like your own personal thoughts of like, is there some interesting bits that you find inspiring in her work or not?
Okay, so Ayn Rand, I've had so many exceedingly intelligent students basically...
Students of what?
Give me her books and basically say, please, Dr. Pasulka, read this book. And I'll tell them, yes, thank you, I've read this book before. And then want to engage in, let me put it this way. They're religious about Ayn Rand. Okay, so to them, Ayn Rand represents some type of way of life, right? Her objectivism. Now, why is she not taken seriously by philosophers in general? Well, let me put it this way. Philosophers in general tend to get pretty, I guess you could call it they're kind of scientists, but with words. I always call philosophy, when I describe it to someone who's going to take a philosophy class, I say
we
it's
combine knowledge.
Math problems, like word math problems. Okay,
so
that's basically what it is.
So they take words very seriously.
Yes, I just did that. I just saw
and
that
definitions very seriously. Yeah, so they all want to get on the same page, so they're not. So there is no confusion. So for Ayn Rand to basically say you can know everything and and establish ethics from that, I think philosophers automatically say no. Now that doesn't mean I say no. In fact, we have at my university a wonderful business school. And when you walk into the dean of the business school's office, Ayn Rand is everywhere.
Wow.
So it's
business.
So I want to say that not all academics are anti-Ayn Rand. And in fact, I don't think philosophers are either, except that they don't teach Ayn Rand. Okay, so in one sense, you could say that because they don't teach her, they're being exclusive in what they teach, or very particular, perhaps, is another way to put it.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to place people like her because, do you put Albert Camus as a philosopher? So I guess what's the good term for that? Like literary philosophers or whatever the term is. It's annoying to me that the academic philosophers get to own the word philosophy because it's just like people who think deeply about life.
Yeah.
That's what I think about as philosophy.
Yeah, okay,
and,
man.
To me, it's like, all right. So I know Nietzsche is another person that's probably not respected in the philosophy circles because he is, full of contradictions, full of...
I love Nietzsche. Nietzsche's my favorite philosopher.
Oh, really?
Yes, I absolutely love Nietzsche.
So he's definitely, I love people that are full of ideas, even if they're full of contradictions, and Nietzsche is
absolutely.
And Ayn Rand is also that. I'm able to look past the obvious ego that's there on the page.
Nah, my ego is everywhere. Oh, she has ego on her page?
She actually has, in my view, a lot of wrong ideas. But there's a lot of interesting tidbits to pick up. And the same goes with Nietzsche. And I'm weirded out by the religious aspect here on both the people who worship Ayn Rand and people who completely dismiss her. I just kind of see it as, can we just read a few interesting things and get inspired by it and move on as opposed to have a dogmatic
religious
about anything. Is there something you find about her work that's interesting to you?
She posts religious stuff?
Or her personality or any of that?
Oh, I think she's fascinating.
She posts religious stuff?
She was a woman who reached a level of success with her mind a time when that was difficult. So, I mean, she's definitely worth looking at for even that reason. But also, her idea, I guess part of the situation with
What are
Rand,
you guys
first of all, I
doing?
think that her work is, it's misinterpreted, okay? And I think that's the same with Nietzsche. Like, a lot of people think that, in fact, it is the case that Nietzsche's writing before the 20th century, so he's got he's somewhat, his rhetoric is
Who's Nietzsche?
sexist and racist, and of the time period.
Philosopher
right? He
Chris
was
Payne is
a
now.
educated.
I'm a black
philosopher
hole
of that time period.
Yes, I am.
However,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
his books are amazing, and
yeah.
Nietzsche's philosophy is
Thank you.
incredible.
Thank you.
And I think that's what you're saying about Rand too, and I agree. I mean, I
About
think that we get caught up. I mean, likely we should, and we should
Philosopher
contextualize
Chris
these
Payne.
thinkers in the time period within which they are.
Oh, yeah.
We should not forgive their, because there were people during Nietzsche's time that were,
Nietzsche, I got
feminist
him in the
and
logbook.
not racist and things like that, and so. But
Racist? Why you
Nietzsche
even got to
has
bring it up?
merit
Out of
I mean,
anything.
I would say Nietzsche is, and you did ask me to talk about some of the books that made the largest impact on me,
Yes.
and Nietzsche's Gay Science is one of them. It's one of the best
My
books
science? Thank you.
ever. in
I
my
appreciate
I
it.
do think Nietzsche was.
Thank you for the. Why are you looking at me
I don't know
weird,
about
buddy?
exactly sexist. He certainly was sexist, but
Sexist.
felt like he didn't get laid much in his life.
Laid.
So,
It felt like
I didn't get laid.
I was like, his theories on women
Humble.
are like, all right.
he's
man.
pretty angry.
He
Humble.
seems frustrated.
Humble.
Yeah.
Like, all right, calm down, buddy.
Oh, the fate of philosophers.
Calm down.
Just ignore everything
Sorry,
Nietzsche says about
philosophers.
women.
Interesting. Wow, this is
course
going to
is
be
unique.
really
It
good.
goes from basic principles all the way to the most advanced techniques in data science.
Hey Lex, what's up? It's philosopher Chris Payne
So you
here.
did write the book, Dear Reader, on Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong-il.
Deal reader.
So that's the previous leader of North Korea. The
Autobiography.
current one is the
Jong-un.
Whoa,
No,
hold
that's-
up,
I did
hold
write
up.
the book, Dear. So you did write the book, Dear Reader, on Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography
He wrote
of
books.
Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
So that's the previous leader of North Korea. The
Unauthorized
current one is
audio.
the
Jong-un.
no creativity on the
Philosopher
naming.
Chris Payne.
Well, no, this is intentional because it's a throwback to the dad.
So there's been only 3 leaders
Yes.
in North Korea. So we've talked about the history of Hitler and Stalin. And
Whoa.
like these. I think it's important to understand that the history of those kinds of humans. The history of North Korea is not well written about or understood, which is why your book is exceptionally powerful and
Are
important.
these 3 self-acclaimed
So,
leaders
maybe
by
in
the
a big,
nation,
broad
or would these technically be,
way, can you say who is Kim Jong Il as a man, as a
Sorry for
leader,
cutting you
as
off,
a
Lex.
historical figure that we should understand, and why should we understand them?
So I wrote Dear Reader by going to North Korea and getting all their propaganda, which is translated to several languages, because the conceit is everyone on Earth is interested in them and wants to mirror their ideology.
And he died in 2011.
2011, yeah.
And you wrote the book in 2012.
I went there in
He died?
2012. I wrote the book, came out in 2014.
Ooh, wow, I remember.
So Kim Jong Il is,
Okay.
though not an intellect, North Korea's version of Forrest Gump. When they write their history, whenever something happens, he's there. And by telling his life story, it's in the first person, he's telling the history of North Korea. So I wanted to write the kind of book
Yep,
where
so
in one
let's
book,
look it out.
and it's the kind of reading you could do in the beach or the bathroom, you're going to get the entire history and know everything you need to know about North Korea in one accessible outlet. And it's
Yeah. You
what
know,
people don't
I don't need
appreciate
to
about North
pee.
Korea. There's several things: how bad it is, and this didn't happen overnight.
How
This
bad
was
it is,
very
and it
systemic
didn't happen
than what this
overnight.
family did to that
Facts.
country, where piece
Facts.
by piece
It's-
they
oh!
did everything in their power to
Sir,
hermetically seal it
I'm
from
glad
the rest
you
of the world,
wrote a book about this.
ramp up the oppression, keep any information from coming in, and they're very
writing books on it
creative
is toxic.
and innovative in their style of manipulation and control.
What?
So
The
there is a
North
farcical
Koreans.
element.
Is that
Let
why
me
do you
give
bring
an
that
example.
up?
So people in the West kind of get it wrong. They talk about when Kim Jong Il played golf for the first time. He gets 17 holes in one. There's this one story
What
about
have these people done in our
Kim
history?
Jong Il shrinking time. And this is a story of how, and it sounds supernatural, but it's not. So Kim Jong Il is at a conference, the dear leader, and someone is giving a talk. And while that person is giving a talk, Kim Jong Il is taking notes and working on his work. And he has an aide who keeps interrupting him with questions. And the speaker keeps stopping. And Kim Jong Il says, "Why are you stopping?" He goes, "I see you're doing these other things." And he goes, No, I can do all these things at once. Everyone was shocked. And they said, this is why Kim Jong Il looks at time not like a plane, but like a cube. And he can shrink time. And my friend goes, "Do they mean multitasking?" And yes, Kim Jong Il is the only person in North Korea who's capable of multitasking. So in order to elevate him, they basically make everyone else in North Korea completely, incompetent. And that has a purpose, because should the leader go away,
North Korea.
this country's going to collapse overnight. So they laugh in the West about all these newspapers show him, at the factory, and he's at the fish hatchery, at the paper plant. They say the difference in North Korea is that the leader goes among the people and does what he calls field guidance. So he will go in that farm and be like, "This is what you need to do." And
Yeah,
he'll
I'll go
here,
to
and he's
I'll
so
go to
smart,
North Korea. I'll
he's
go
good
to
at
North
everything.
Korea right now.
And thanks to him for sharing his wisdom with us, and he's not removed from the people like in every other country.
Why does that seem to go wrong with humans, do you think?
Yo,
That
I
is
will
kind
go to
of
North Korea.
The structure.
Why
of
would it go
this
wrong? You don't
figure,
steal anything. You
this
just
authoritarian,
behave.
this totalitarian structure
You
where
take
there's
Magic
one figure
Johnson and
that's
ball.
comfort and knowledge.
Kim Jong Il is not good at farming. Kim Jong Il is
He
not
can
good
party.
at
He can
machinery.
fucking rage.
It's all a complete lie.
Yeah.
Or the things he'll point out will be things that are completely obvious. Oh, here's another
Yeah,
example they
I
use.
can. That is obvious,
In
probably.
North Korea, they have something called the Tower of the Juche, which is an obelisk, which looks like the Washington Monument, but it's completely different because it's got this like plastic torch at the top. And they talk about
Whoa,
in the propaganda
Juche
how
Tower.
all the architects got together and they said, "Oh, we should make this the second tallest stone obelisk in the world." And Kim Jong Il says, "No, let's make it the tallest." They're like, "Oh, we never thought of this before." And the way
Oh yeah, that's what I'm
and
doing
it's-
right
and
here.
he's the
I'm
first
glad
person
you
to
guys
do
are
this.
catching on.
Like
Philosopher
these
Chris
architects
Payne.
are having a brainstorming session, the Tower of the Juche idea. They're like, "All right,
You
we gotta do
laughing,
something
Lex? Yeah,
innovative
yeah,
with
Lex,
North
my
Korea
man now.
What can we
Okay,
do?
trap.
How about second biggest? He's gonna go for this." And then he's like, "Oh, we never thought of this." It's
Let it
it's
go.
so-
Let it
because I
go.
present it at
Let
face
it
value.
go.
People sometimes say the book's a satire. It's not a satire. I downplayed all this
Okay,
stuff.
so what
It's
should
a
be the
farce. Here's
number
another
one
example.
thing then?
North Korea is very big, and I think Russia is to some extent too, on amusement parks, fun fairs they call them in the British
How do
style.
who gets to pick?
Because this is the chance for the people to all
The
get
leader
together.
gets to be like, yo.
And there was this amusement park. It's almost like South Park in Cartman, where there's
No,
all these
I'm
rides,
Philosopher Chris Payne.
and Kim Jong Il's like, "I'm not gonna let any elderly or children take these rides until I put myself in danger and ride them myself." And they go, "But dear leader, it's drizzling." And he goes, "No, I have to make sure these rides are going to be safe for everyone, even during the light rain." They go, "Well, can we go on these rides with you?" No. I have to be the courageous one. And he's riding all the rides, and they're standing there crying at his courage.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
what's...
yeah.
And you ask all the thing in one power, it's like, listen, I'm quite confident that those funfair engineers are in a position to ride Modest Mouse, whatever it's called, by themselves, and be like, "Yeah, okay, this is good for the kids." Although to be fair, some of those amusement parks are pretty rusty and dangerous.
Yeah, but that,
Yes.
that kind of propaganda. I guess.
Wow. Don't
I'm
even
playing
mention
devil's advocate
kids
is
in
like,
this thing.
It's
Sorry.
comforting and it's
You
useful.
talk about the kids in North
but
Korea?
it does
Whoa.
seem that naturally leads to an abuse of power.
But it's not. How can it
Abuse
be
of
used
power?
correctly?
No,
No
you
one
brought it
person
up.
has the intellect or the mind to understand the entirety of an economy.
Yes, you do. You
let
can
alone
bring
every
it all
individual
up.
Field of interest.
I'll go there.
Well, for example, you
I'll
can
go
have an
there.
artificial intelligence system that understands the entirety of it.
I'll go there. I got you, Lex. Pull up with me to North Korea, Lex. He's probably got North
But,
Korean
like, the question is,
dentists that could like do some
like,
real nice work.
The human version of that is like you can hire a lot of experts, right? You can be
Mm-hmm.
an extremely good manager. And then
Since everything's dynamic, they're not gonna have the data.
Philosopher
kind of
Chris
manage it
Payne.
well.
it
Philosopher
seems that
Chris
there's
Payne.
like what George Washington allegedly did. It seems like most
My
humans are not able
home
to fly
is Camp
themselves.
Washington.
You're
There's a
not able
blue
to,
sign
like-
for the New York State
Yeah, you're right.
Preservation.
Be a check on your own power, but that's not. If I was like, if I was creating a human, it's like that's
I
not
just
an
had to
obvious
cut. Sorry,
bug of the
because
system that
I love George
we
Washington.
would not be able to fire
For
ourselves.
the dollar bill,
to know
y'all.
when we have. I mean, it seems like that's something you have to know always. Like that's something I often wonder. Is
The
like,
dollar
am I
bill,
wrong
y'all.
about this?
Lex,
This is
how
what we
much you
talked
get
about
paid
earlier.
for this?
What are the safety valves?
Yeah.
To make sure that, okay, if I am incorrect or my knowledge is finite, Plato's cave kind of thing, what mechanisms are in place that my mistake or limited information
Listen!
isn't going to have deleterious consequences?
Philosopher Chris
And
Payne.
North Korea does not really have that, and as a result, they had polio in the 90s.
Well, I actually would be very well inclined to wonder about, how are they doing in their health system if it's just like hush hush.
People are not asking the right questions. They're not asking the right questions because they kind of think.
How do you know what is good?
There's lots of standards of good. But for me, to be a good guy is if you want to leave the world a little bit better than you found it. That to me is the definition of a good guy. And I think there are many people that's not their motivation at all.
Oh, it's about your motivation.
Well, it's also about if your motivation is at all correlated to reality. No one thinks we're the bad guys. That's correct. But are you taking steps to check your motivations and also it takes a certain amount of humility? Because if you're going to start interfering with other people's lives, you really better be sure you know what you're talking about.
The control of others, if you do have centralized control, or then you become a leader of a group, you better do so humbly and cautiously.
And also have
that how you do it?
Steam valves, right? So if in case things go wrong, I'm sure this is a lot happening with AI, whatever, or with computers. Like, okay, if something goes wrong here, how do we have a workaround
Goes
to make
wrong
sure it doesn't
here.
cause everything
You
to
just
collapse?
be good.
The going wrong thing, I mean, the whole
You
the
just be
feedback
good.
mechanism.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if people in Congress think that things are really wrong.
No. It's
working
about
for
the
them.
topics you're talking about.
Are you sure? Because
I'm not
Doing
sure.
business.
I'd like to believe that the people that at least when they got into politics actually wanted, some of it is ego, but some of it is like wanting to be the kind of person that builds a better world.
Sure. I also think it's diverse. Some who are going to have different motivations than others.
But like,
I think you have to
once you're in
combine the
system and trying
business
to build a
though.
better world, how do you know
It doesn't
that
have
it's
to
not
mean
working?
you have to have a part
Like,
of it.
how do you take the basic feedback mechanisms and actually productively change? I mean, that's what it means to be a good guy. It's
Productively
like,
change?
something's
How were
wrong
you
here.
ever, like,
And
imprinted
that's
as
why I
bad?
like Elon Musk, like, think from first principles. Like, wait, okay. Let's ask the big question. Like, can this be... One, is this working at all? Like, the way we're solving this particular problem of government, is this working at all? And then, like, stepping away and saying, like, as opposed to modifying this bill or that bill, or like this little strategy, like increase the tax by this much or decrease the tax by this much, like, why do we have a democracy at all? Or why do we have
it is a
any
democracy?
kind of representative democracy? Shouldn't it be a pure democracy?
Okay.
Or
Yeah,
why
good
do
questions.
we have
really good
states?
questions, man? I wish. Are you
Like
in charge?
representation of states and federal government and so on. Why do we have this kind of separation of powers? Is this different? Why don't we have term limits or not? Like big things. Like how do you actually make that happen? And is that what it means to be a good guy? It's like taking big revolutionary steps as opposed to incremental steps.
Well,
It's
I don't know that you
about.
can be a politician to be a good guy to be honest.
It's
Let
about.
me give you a counterexample of someone who you can tell is not being a good guy. Joe Biden said he regards the Iraq War as a mistake. Okay, you and I have made mistakes in our lives, I'm sure. None of our mistakes have caused tens of thousands of people to die. If let's suppose
Speak for yourself.
that's fair. Okay, I'll take that. I don't build the kill bots. If I were a chef,
Wow.
let's take it
yeah,
out of
that's
politics.
horrible. 10,000.
And in my restaurant, somehow, accidentally, someone ate something and they died. I would feel horrible. But more importantly, I would be like, we need to look through the system and figure out how it got to the point where someone lost their life. Because that can never happen again. And we need to figure out step by step. I'm not a gun person, but there's like this checklist of like if you're holding a gun, there's 5 things to do, and even if you get 2 wrong, you're gonna be safe. It's like assume every gun is loaded, only pointed at something that you want to kill, and there's like 3 other things, and it's like to
Boy
make
Scouts.
sure that nothing goes wrong. So
Boy Scouts.
if I'm that chef, and I would have to not only
Yo, I had the archery.
take preventative action to make sure this has no possibility of happening again. If you look at the staff he's putting in, it's the same warmongers that would have advised him to get into the Iraq War on the first time. That is, to me, is not a good guy. That to me is someone who does not feel remorse for their responsibility in killing not only many Americans, but some of us think that, dead Iraqis isn't necessarily ideal either.
It wouldn't even be the president, but he's a part of that. It's a group energy. That's the weirdest part. I wouldn't know. What is love?
And I study black holes, Code Academy,
Yeah,
and open
yeah.
up a whole landscape of possibilities.
Love, I think, is the soul burning on
What
fire.
is love.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what do you
Philosopher
think
Chris
this thing
Payne.
is,
How do you beat
like,
that?
Our
You can't beat
attachment to other
that.
human beings.
I'm different because
And
I'm
is it something that we should give to just a few people?
Yeah.
born
Yes,
in
that's for sure.
1994.
When I was working with D.L. Hughley in his book, he
Philosopher
didn't
Chris
use the
Payne.
term, but he was describing like
Whose
low-key
book?
depression. And he talked about how he was in the airport
Oh, this is
and
one
he
of them.
noticed a girl
Depression
had a
is a
red dress, and he went up and thanked her. and she was like,
interesting
"Why, thank you
word.
for-" And he had realized he hadn't registered color in like weeks. And I think love is like that. When you see someone and you just like, oh, like your eyes are open, like this is something I've never seen before, or I want more of this, that kind of thing. It's really,
Wow.
it really disorients and reorients your thinking.
Don't you find that like
So I found
the
love and
world is full of
depression?
that, like, nonstop?
What?
It's not just like a person either. It's like
But yes, but when it's in a person, it's a whole other level because it's like I could have this is going to be great for
Nah, I'm
years.
always
It's
a
like
person.
every day it's something new. I mean that is rare.
you think it's rare. I mean,
Find someone who you could talk to them for years and not run out of things to talk
oh,
to.
that's true for years. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's rare. And know that they really, if you leave the room, they will do right by you. That's really rare.
Well, from a Russian perspective, you just don't give them another choice.
You're Russian? Whoa. What is love? Oh, no way.
I
Bob
had just started as an
Lazar.
engineer working on the International Space Station.
Sheesh.
And I remember
Lex and Bob Lazar.
Another
Philosopher
person
Chris
that seems
Payne.
to be
Yeah.
a key figure in this.
Yo, what?
In the mythology
Diana
of this,
Walsh,
Bob Lazar,
Polska, and Lex
it'd be
Friedman. Lex Friedman.
Interesting. Maybe there's others
Friedman?
you can tell me about, but Bob, who's also been on Joe Rogan, but his story has been told quite a bit. That he's got.
Yeah.
I think he said that he witnessed some of the work being done on the spacecraft that was captured and so on, in order to
Captured.
try to reverse engineer some of the technology in terms of the propulsion and so on.
They
What are your
captured a
thoughts
spaceship?
about his story, how it fits into the mythology
Under
of this
the
whole
sea.
thing, and broader ufologist community?
Okay, so regarding Bob Lazar,
UFOs.
with respect to his claims, again, I have no way to adjudicate whether or not he actually,
Oh, I hate
encountered
that
this.
word. It's a good one.
Do
I'll
you
show
have
you.
friends who are? And the people that I know who know his story, some know him, believe him. And they have said to me that the most important thing that they think he has said,
Divert.
in fact, one of them, I think, made a meme out of it or something like that. It was basically, he said, maybe the public, I regret making it public. Maybe the public isn't ready for this kind of information. And basically, they emphasized that to me. And they emphasized it so much that they wanted me to know, right? So
To me?
that is somewhat creepy to me. So I think, okay, this poor guy, Bob Lazar. So many people, this is what happens to people who have experiences like this. They're questioned, their reputations are put on the line. In some instances, their reputations are manipulated on purpose to make them look
Talk your voice.
To me,
Speak
as
your voice. Unless you do,
scientist,
what is he
it's
doing? Bob
inspiring
Lazar stuff?
That
But he got kicked
it kind
out.
of gives this kind of. I'm not even thinking of it. Is there an actual spacecraft being hidden somewhere and studied and so on?
It's
I'm thinking of
Philosopher
it
Chris
like
Payne, Lex.
I don't know. It's a thing
What
that
up?
gives you a
Sorry,
spark
buddy.
of a dream. As a reminder that we don't understand most of how this world works, and then we can build technologies that aren't here today that will allow us to understand much more. And then it's kind of like almost like a feeling that it provides.
Put it in a
that
rap
it
song.
inspires and makes you dream. That's the way I see the Bob Lazar story. I don't necessarily.
I need
People
to
ask me
listen.
because I'm at MIT. People ask me like, did Bob Lazar actually go to MIT and so on? I don't know, and I personally don't care.
These
Like,
are
it's,
things that like yo
that's not what's
y'all
interesting
getting
to me
y'all
about
all getting
that
violated
story. To me, the
everything.
myth is more interesting. Not interesting actually, but inspiring.
Yes, because inspiring, you're suggesting that the myth inspires you to create reality.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm
true.
a black hole. Philosopher
So even
Chris
if it's,
Payne.
like, not real.
It doesn't
I'm also-
matter, does it?
It doesn't. I mean, in some sense, just like you said,
There's
it
an
does,
event horizon.
In some sense, it doesn't.
Yo, what? The meaning of life with aliens and humans?
Halo with me.
Yo, let's see what you guys gotta say, yo.
Control the weight the whole way.
Get the
Yo, I'm tuned in, yo. Philosopher Chris Payne, let's
What
get
do you
it.
think the biggest, since we're covering every single possible topic, let me ask the biggest one, the unanswerable one, from the perspective of alien intelligence, or from the perspective of religious studies, or from the perspective of just Diana, what do you think is the meaning of this existence, of this life of ours?
Yes, okay, so, all right, so, well, of course I have to, my philosophical training as undergrad always makes me
Got you.
think about, like, What's the assumption in your question? There's an assumption there. It's like there is a meaning. Okay, that's the assumption.
What do you mean by meaning? What do you mean by life?
Yeah.
Can you define the terms?
No, but listen. Okay, I'll answer your question. I'm just going to say that there's this assumption that we should have meaning to life, okay?
I'm not giving
well,
you a
maybe
degree,
we
but
shouldn't. Maybe it's just
I'll
all
give
random,
you
okay?
guidance.
However, I believe that it's not. And in my opinion, the meaning of life, in my opinion, is intrinsic. I enjoy living. I want to live. Sometimes I don't enjoy living. And when I don't enjoy living, I change my circumstances. So it's intrinsic. And I think that certain things are intrinsic. And like love of your children is kind of, well, it's actually physiological, but it's also intrinsic. It's beautiful. You know, there's something about it that is intrinsically desirable. So I think the meaning of life is like that, intrinsically desirable.
So it's something that just is born inside you based on what makes you feel good?
No, that's hedonism. That's.
So, but where do you place love? Love of your children?
Yeah, so basically, love of your children, by the way, is not always easy because they do things that they shouldn't do. You have to discipline them. That's one of the worst things about parenthood to me is disciplining my children. I don't like to do that. I love them. So a lot of things that I do that I feel are good are not easy. So
I'm not
there's
a
an
parent yet,
intrinsic
can't
sense
wait.
that, like, okay, let's take
we'll see.
animals. Okay, so
I
we have
can
dogs
adopt.
and cats. Okay,
I
so
am adopted.
you might not, but I do. I told you about them.
Can you share their names?
If I share their names, I will share their names. Okay, so we have a cat, and it has red fluffy hair, and so we called it Trump. Well, when we got our dog,
Philosopher
we figured that it needed a companion, so we called it Putin. So we have Trump and Putin.
That's the greatest
Whoa.
pet names of all time.
That's actually
and
Yo, what?
or maybe we'll be
Bad
able to share a
Trump.
picture of your cat.
Bad
This
Trump.
is awesome.
It is
Good
so cute,
Putin.
yeah.
Bad Putin.
Very
Putin.
photogenic.
Quit eating Trump shit.
I mean, is this something that's whether we're talking about love or the intrinsic meaning? Do you think
The
that's
fucking dog and the
something
cat shit all the time.
that's really special to humans?
Dog and
or
the cat
if
shit all
there's
the time.
intelligent alien civilizations out there, do you think that's
I'm
something
not an alien. I'm
that they
a
possess as well?
philosopher Chris Panem. I'm a
Maybe
black
in
hole.
different forms, like whatever this thing that
K Pain 8.0.
is, this intrinsic drive that we have. Do you think that's just a property of life, of some level of complexity?
She said intrinsic desire.
That we'll see that
the
everywhere
meaning of
in this
life, and that
universe?
was kind of a good
In
point.
my opinion, and this is just my opinion.
It's cool.
I do think that it is, but I also think that it can take different forms. So if there is like, think of gravity, right? Gravity kind of like makes stuff stick to it, right? It attracts stuff. Well, what does love do? That does that too, right? So people who
Lead?
are, we call them charismatic. Charism, it means love. Charism means light and love. So a charismatic person
Korea
is a
is
person
champagne.
who attracts people to them like the sun does, right? Like, you know? So,
I'm
so
a
I
black
think
hole
that
of info,
whatever
and
this
when I walk
property is
around, I'm
that's
blind you with
intrinsic
my light.
is like gravity, and most likely takes different forms
Blind you
in
with
different
the
types of
light.
life forms.
Yeah, I can't wait until like Albert Einstein type of figure in the future will discover that love is in fact one of the fundamental forces of physics.
That would be cool.
Diana, this is one of the favorite conversations I've ever had. It's truly an honor to talk to you. And thank you so much for spending all this time with me.
Absolutely, it's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Grammarly is your personal writing assistant for clear emails, confident messages, stronger essays.
Whoa.
If you look at the
aliens
history of
are
our space
a
programs,
part of-
both Russian and American, you're going to find some pretty weird stuff.
About
Pretty weird history
aliens?
there, Lex.
On
So
Wikipedia,
you
though?
want to get an
Just
idea,
Wikipedia?
go back to Tchaikovsky and read a little bit about what he has to say. If you look back at the history of our space programs, the viable space programs are both Russian and American, and each has an amazingly strange history because the founders of the calculations that got us up into space, the rocket scientists basically, were doing some pretty weird rituals and doing religious things, right? They weren't necessarily like Jack Parsons on our side. Was out in the desert with people like L. Ron Hubbard and doing really intense rituals, believing that they were opening stargates and things like that. Okay,
that's awesome,
and they were really doing that. Okay, so then you go to the Russian side, and they had
lame.
I've spoken with David Fravor on this podcast. I really like him as a person.
Come on now.
He's a fun guy, but also he's gotten a chance to.
Sorry, Lex.
He's described his account of having experience with what he and others now term the Tic Tac UFO. What do you think of that particular sighting, which has captivated the imagination of many, in particular because there's been videos released of it?
Yes.
Of these UFOs, but I find the videos to be way too blurry and grainy to be of interest to me.
They're not interesting to you? Why are you bringing it up? Who's hiring you?
Is the first-person account from David and others about that experience.
I'm sorry,
buddy. What are your thoughts?
Those videos have been out for a while, actually, I think in the mid-2000s they were out. But what you have is kind of like this corroboration from a group and also the New York Times involvement in 2017. My opinion about the Tic Tacs is that, first, I believe the people who have had the experiences. I know some of them, like, some of the radar people and things like that. They saw them, and I don't believe they're making it up, okay? I do think that this is being used as a spin, okay? And I'm just going to say that. And the reason I think that is because at the time it was released, I was still in touch with many people who were among the UFO Fight Club. And so they had intimate knowledge of these things. And the first thing they said was, we have satellites that can read the news on your phone when you're reading it. So we've got better footage than this, and this is not good footage at all. Therefore, they believe that it was authentic footage that had been doctored up. Now, why?
Why?
I don't know why.
Because it's Lex.
So I honestly don't know if it's accurate or not. I mean, I believe the people, absolutely. But was this something out there to fool these people? Perhaps.
Do the difficult intellectual work of being cognizant of your mortality, of like fully engaging in life, in a life of reason too, of thinking deeply about the world, all those kinds of things. If you get like a nice car or something like that and just like, I don't know, all the different things you could do with money, it can make you forget that. Anyway, there's a long way to say that, yes, it's very nice that it coincided nicely with the book, but also like I said, I think it inspired quite a lot of people that, maybe there's a lot of things out there that it reminded a lot of people there's things out there we don't know about.
Lex, I can agree with you on that. But can I push back on two things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. The first one is that I was happy to receive money from the book because of the New York Times article. That's absolutely false. So I published my book with Oxford, which is an academic press, and you don't get paid with an academic press. Okay, so money was not it for me. What it was recognition that my research was being validated. So, because then people called me and said,
"Who is Oxford?
Well, maybe it's more than interesting." Okay, and they did. Okay, the other thing about money
make it more
is just as you say.
Sorry,
that
I apologize.
I agree with you. I'm upset about money too. I think there should be universal
I'm not upset
healthcare,
about money. I just don't get the confusion of
I don't think people should be in poverty, especially because we are so wealthy as a species, frankly. Okay, that said, think about this.
India.
If you don't have money, you can't have a life of the mind either. Right?
100%. So I'm not espousing that like money's the devil. I just think that
it's a little bit of rats.
Money can be a drug, or I would compare it to like food or something like that, where like you really should have enough
consumption thing
to nourish yourself.
Yes.
Water and energy.
Too much could.
Too much.
There's
can be a
things that you
problem.
can purchase, materials or
that's where I come from
consumptions.
with money, and I'm just aware. I'm fortunate enough to have the skills and the health to be able to earn a living in whatever way Like I wish of him being in the United States and being able to speak English. Oh yeah, this rocks. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe my next book.
Yes, your sense is there's something, as there's some groups of people that may be trying to leverage this for financial gains.
And probably good financial. I mean, they may have good reasons for this too. Like,
it's
okay, let's
only
take the
me,
study of
philosopher
UFOs,
Chris
okay?
Payne.
Maybe
I'm just trying to see if people talk about
that
real
decide
shit.
who dole out the money. Let's put it
Sorry,
that way.
guys.
They think UFOs aren't real, so they're not going to give these programs money. So how do these programs make money? They're going to have to find a way to do it. So maybe that's how they do it. Okay, so
That's fascinating. This is a way to raise money for
doing the.
All you need to launch a celebrated art career. A cheap studio.
Clickbait title.
Website with an
Maybe.
template and a
What's up, philosopher Chris Payne?
Pamela McCordick has this quote that I like. I talked to her a couple of years ago, or I guess already in this podcast, that artificial intelligence began with the ancient wish to forge the gods. So, do you think artificial intelligence may become the very kind of gods that were at the center of the religions of most of our history?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I'm going to start by addressing this idea of artificial intelligence being separate from human beings. Okay, so I don't think that's actually, that might happen. Okay, I mean it's already happened, but let's put it this way: like you're talking about super artificial intelligence, like autonomous, conscious artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Something with artificial consciousness.
First of all, I think she's correct. Okay, but also
She
is awesome, an
my
awesome
feminine
quote.
side.
I'd also like to bring up this writer of fiction, actually, Ted Chiang, and one of his essays. He writes short essays. One of them was the basis for the movie Arrival, which, if you haven't seen it, it's a really great movie about UFOs. And
it has a very creative way of proposing an idea of how they might be able to communicate. First of all, how they appear to us. Second of all, how they may be communicating with us humans.
Oh my God,
Exactly.
years.
The author Ted Chiang has a lot. I recommend his writings, his short stories. One is very short, and it appeared in Nature about 20 years ago, and it is called, I think it's called Eating the Crumbs from the Table or something like that. And it's basically I hate to do to do a spoiler here, but if you don't want to know what it's about, don't listen right now.
Yeah,
5
spoiler
minutes.
alert.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what it's about. So basically, it's about
Sorry,
human
guys.
beings.
Everything with Jira Service Management, it's like a higher velocity overall, which means we can deliver faster and spend more time on other stuff, like brainstorming names for our heavy metal band.
All right, this looks wild. Let's see what we got. Make it fun,
Can you speak
man.
a little bit
I
more
won't
to the
violate you. Just make it fun.
Connection between aliens and technology that Jacques Vallée had in his own one individual mind. That's very tempting to kind of separate as two separate endeavors. Why did you come to believe that they are at one and the same?
Is this a
Or at
serious
least
convo
part of the same
in 2020 about
intellectual
aliens?
journey?
Thanks for asking that again, because nobody asks me that question. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask you.
it's
I
central
won't let you
to
answer that.
My project.
in terms of non-believer and believer, there's when you say believer, you also are kind of implying this
to believe
the idea that aliens have visited or had made direct contact with humans in some form. There's also the exploration and the idea of just alien
Explore it.
intelligence
We should be seeing this
in the universe.
Yeah.
You know, the Drake equation estimating
Philosopher
how many
Chris Payne.
intelligent civilizations
Lex.
may be out there, how many have ever existed, how many are able to communicate with us. I mean, when you just zoom out from our own little selfish perspective of Earth and look at the entirety, let's say the Milky Way galaxy, but maybe even the universe.
Whoa.
Does the idea that there are intelligent civilizations out there something that you're excited about,
even interesting,
or something that you're terrified about?
That's a good
imagination.
So basically, I would say I'm not so keen on it. I think that our relationship with technology, as it is, and as, as I hope it will go, will help us survive. Okay, I don't think we're equipped to do it as we stand now, but I think that if we can up our game, or let's just put it this way,
there's some dude that made mad money said he shot aliens
it will help us
in a freaking
because it'll probably be smarter than us. Okay,
Area
it'll help
51
us survive in the
stuff,
ways in which it determines best.
And I'm like, what?
That said, if there
a
are
book
non-human
made money from that
out there, and they have more advanced, obviously
photos, videos,
technologies than us, and they actually come. The history of human engagement with, other cultures has not gone well for cultures that are less aggressive.
What type of cultures are these aliens?
So you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not a good idea.
Non-fungal?
Well, I wonder where we stand where humans stand in the full spectrum of aggression.
Well, heck,
these
where are we now,
fucking
Lex?
aliens, we gotta
great
fucking take the aliens and get to the spaceship.
No, I know, but that will give us a benefit, right?
Yo, take me for a ride in the spaceship, dude. Yo.
Okay, I see. I just have a sense that there may be a lot of intelligences out there that are less aggressive.
I need a chastity belt.
Because they've evolved past it.
We can't assume that.
No,
Yo, take me for a ride in the spaceship.
Then I'm gonna assume the worst.
That'd be so nuts.
Despite the
we
fact
will
that
go
I'm
470
Russian
in
and think
2
that life is
seconds.
suffering,
Fuck you, Elon, yo.
Best, but I tend to assume that there is a best.
We out. Philosopher Chris Payne. Spaceship riders.
To people and to creatures that ultimately wins out.
Take that nitro on the
evolutionary
counter.
Advantage to being good.
Boost
to other living creatures. And so ultimately, I think that if there's intelligence,
fuck it, I'll shotgun one of them with the alien
out there that prosper sufficiently to be able to
I would shotgun one with Lex.
It'd
be lit.
Space that they've evolved past silly aggression. That it's more likely in my mind to be deeply cooperative. So like growth over destruction. Like growth does not require destruction, I think. But if you see the universe as ultimately a place where it's highly constrained in resources that are necessary for traveling across space and time, then perhaps aggression is necessary in order to
you take down Trump's wall and you build
get access to those resources.
You build a sound barrier.
I tend to try to be optimistic on that front.
I think I'm emotionally optimistic and intellectually non-optimistic.
Yeah, I guess I'm there with you.
Yeah,
I tend to believe that the
intellectually is tough
and deep fulfillment in life is
no,
found in
intellectually is not tough.
The intellectual place is really useful for building cool new technologies and ideas and so on, but happiness is in the emotional place, and there it pays off to be optimistic, I think.
Whoa.
You said
Oh.
it was I.
So I mentioned to you offline that I'm finishing up on the rise and fall of the Third Reich. I'm not sure if you have anything in your exploration interesting
What's
to
the
say,
Third Reich?
but the use of religion by dictators, or the lack of the use of religion by dictators, whether we're talking
Third
about
Reich, is
Stalin,
that the-
which is mostly secular. I apologize if I'm historically incorrect on this, but I believe it's
Oh wow.
secular.
So there's a second
Hitler,
and third.
I think there's
a
some
fourth.
controversy about how much religion played a role in his own personal life and
No.
in general, in terms of
The first
influencing the
Germany verse.
using it to manipulate the
Italy,
public.
Milan.
But definitely the church played a role. Do you have a sense of the use of religion by
Religion-
governments to control the
By
population?
authoritarian
By
states.
dictators, for example? Or is that outside of your
Dictators.
explorations
Oh,
as a religious scholar?
dictators.
It's not outside of my framework. Absolutely not. I think that it's done routinely. Propaganda is done routinely.
Dictators-
especially, there's nothing more powerful than religion to get people to act. I think.
To be peaceful and have them.
My mother's Jewish and my father was Roman Catholic. Okay, from Irish extraction, and so both members, both great grandparents, came here under duress because they were being, what would you call it? There was an active genocide on both sides being done by other cultures. Okay, so on the one hand, obviously we know about the Holocaust. Okay, so the great grandparents came here
But
to
dictators wouldn't be
avoid
like.
that, and
I
they
don't.
made it.
Dictators don't
on
force
the other hand,
religion. Ever.
there was an English genocide. We just have to say it. The Irish. It was called a famine, but it wasn't one.
Irish potato famine, yo! I had an Irish roommate in college. Oh,
Irish left Ireland on coffin ships, is what they called them, because they usually wouldn't get here. Mine happened to get here. Okay, so that's the context that I'm coming
Wine.
from. So in each case, for one thing, the Irish weren't considered, there was...
Is this for
Catholics
kids?
weren't considered, they were considered to be terrible. And there was a lot of anti-Catholic rhetoric here in the United States, which is kind of strange, because one of the, in
They
fact,
serve
the most
wine, the
wealthy
shit.
colonial family were the
Ugh.
Carrolls in Maryland, and they were Catholic. So when you look at the United States, at our history, and you see the separation of church and state, do you want to know where that came from? That came from those guys. They convinced George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. I mean, they couldn't vote, yet they have their names on the Constitution. Is that not a strange contradiction? So here,
I think,
here you can see how propaganda works.
You guys
There was
listening? You want me to talk?
Anti-Catholic propaganda. There was anti-Jewish propaganda, and a lot of it was that these
No,
people
I'm
weren't
saving it.
human. They weren't human beings.
Yep.
Another thing I'd like to say.
Whoa, human.
is
Yes,
that
the H
when
word.
the Irish did come here, they were indentured. A lot of times indentured servants.
Oh, they were.
But that's terminology. What is an indentured servant?
Slave.
Pretty much.
Oh!
So in that sense,
The
religion.
truth is told again, and this has not been spoken on in a lot of content that I've been browsing on.
Of saying this is the other.
And it's powerful too, because behind it is a force of what people contend to be sacred,
Humble.
a sacred force, right? So
They
it's
over
up to
it.
God
They over it.
to
Hell yeah, they
decide.
over it.
So you have to go along with what God
They
says.
just
of
suck
course.
at soccer
that's
now.
Basically, that's not the context.
Nah,
The
yo,
context
my
of it
other
is
roommate
usually
played in
some
Belfast,
very
Ireland.
specific, legitimate
He had a 1-year
event that
contract and he
person
played
has with something that
NBA,
is
not
non-human
NBA, but
or
yeah, he
considered
played that
divine.
league.
But when religions
Yeah.
become narrativized, I would call it, by different institutions.
Yo,
that's
when
you're
I
in
smoke
danger
a
of getting propaganda.
joint with the Pope, that's when we talking the most dope. That's when we talking the real shit. You get me with the Pope smoking, man. Yo, Francis, I know your name Jorge. Yo, Jorge, I know you hear me. Jorge, I know you hear me. Yeah. Philosopher Chris Payne.
So a lot of people know how much I love 2001: Space Odyssey. So I got all of these
2001
emails asking like, "Hey, bro,
hey,
do you know what's up with the monoliths in like the middle of the desert or whatever it was?" I haven't been actually paying attention. I apologize. But you kind of mentioned offline that this was kind of cool and interesting. What do you make of these monoliths? And in general, are you a fan of 2001: Space Odyssey, where monoliths?
How the fuck did a friend of mine
Do you have any thoughts
show it to
about
me?
either the science fiction, the mythology of it, or the reality of it?
Yes. Okay.
No, okay. And please say more.
Right. So, first of all, Kubrick's films are not ever easy for me because they're so weird, right? And I don't actually enjoy watching them. But that
Work.
it doesn't take away from their incredible brilliance, though, and their visionary merit. So, 2001: Space Odyssey is incredibly visionary, and of course, all those things that people say, I don't have to restate them. In terms of it's a subtext to my book, by the way. I didn't mean it to be, but it's almost a character in my book, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And when the monoliths started to appear, again, everything went crazy with my everything, internet, social media, phone. What's up? What's going on, right? Is this disclosure? And I thought, well, I'll tell you one thing, let's look at the timing of it. It's if it's an art, and then copy art and things like
Harambe.
that. It's actually happening at a really interesting time when all of us are forced to go online. When all of us are forced, because of COVID, right? Yeah. We're completely now invaded by the screen, or we're invading the screen.
Why was it that
like we're living in our infrastructure now is completely changed. So the monolith, basically, if art is supposed to show us life, it certainly has. If that's an art project, somebody did an awesome job with it. But apparently that monolith was there for a long time, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's been there for a couple of years, so they said. Okay, all right. That said, if your audience is interested, I think the best theory about the meaning of the monolith is Robert Ager or Robert Ayer. I think it's Robert Ager. He's got a website where he does analyses of films, and it's called Collative Learning, and he does the meaning of the monolith. Everyone should go look at that because I fully agree with him. When I studied different meanings of the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey, I was fascinated. Okay, so what is this about? I accepted as soon as I listened to it, and watched it. So basically, he says that the monolith is okay. Can you pick up your phone here? What does that look like?
It looks awfully a lot like a monolith.
Yeah. Okay, so basically that's what he was saying, was that Kubrick was basically, the monolith was technology, or the screen in particular. And he basically was saying that the cinema screen, we were being, completely, and if you think about it, look at all this, we live in a screen culture. We have computer screens, iPhone screens, or, phone screens. We have TV screens. Everything is something, now that COVID has come, we're forced to go into these screens, and we're forced to live a different material existence than we have lived before. So in my sense, I think that if it's an art project, it's a really good one for that.
So I like that that meaning of it. It's a screen. And
my friend came through and we smoked in the hospital bathroom.
In the sense of the screen between reality and our mind. The screen of the computer.
But I can't tell you who it was because one of them really will freak out.
We might be one day living
He hates that shit.
There will be an interface. I mean, ultimately, it's about the interface.
And I got a photo.
That's interesting. It's an interface to another.
I got a video on Snapchat too.
Ideas.
It's also material change. It's a change in our material. I mean, when people talk about augmented reality, I say we already live in augmented reality.
No, we don't. I'm just really not trying to be rude. It's just you're talking about a monolith, and you guys are stumbling over it and giving me time to react. This is ridiculous.
And remind yourself how
just contact me unless you really are right.
30 years ago, the internet changed so much.
Philosopher
and
Chris
social media
Payne
has changed so much about actually just the space
Alexander
of our
Hamilton was
thinking.
19 when he wrote the
Wikipedia
president. Let me run for
changed
president
so
right now.
much about the offloading of our knowledge, the way we interact with knowledge. I mean, it offloaded our long-term memory about facts onto a digital format. So in the sense, it expanded our mind.
Floppy disk.
It's kind of interesting. I'd be curious to see. He has just one interpretation. I wonder if there's
I've corresponded
others.
with him, yes. So over the years, he and I have corresponded. And I told him, I said, look, I'm going to be using this in my book, so I think you should read what I say.
Luke,
And he of course wanted to see it. So
What do you think about your book? Did you get a chance to read it?
yeah. So he is a non-believer in alien intelligence and UFOs, and that's fine, but
Believer.
I still agree with him that the meaning of the monolith was the screen, but that doesn't mean the screen isn't like what David Bowie said, right? So it's not exclusive. So I can still use his theory, but differ from the conclusions.
Yo, how do
to launch a
religions
culinary empire.
start?
Tools you claim
I watched the
everyone has in
Vice
the kitchen.
video that was super lit.
And a
on this.
Squarespace.
Lex, sorry for that intro, but yo, what up?
So can we talk about myth and religion a little bit?
Yes.
Myth!
Can we start at the beginning, which is like myths?
I'll trade you a
How are they
rune
born?
scimitar for a mithril
There's this
scimitar.
collective
though.
intelligence amongst us human
Myth is
beings, and
weak.
we seem to create these beautiful ideas that captivate the minds of millions. How is such a myth born?
Great question. Okay, so that brings us to terminology again.
What myth?
In my field, we definitely, I think, try not to distinguish between religion. This is going to be controversial, I think, between religion and myth, because we call other cultures' religions myths, right? And then we call our myths religions.
And I guess myth has a bad connotation to it, that it's
It's
not
not
somehow
true.
real.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, what's interesting is that people like Plato, who lived thousands of years ago, 2,500 about, basically made this distinction himself within his own culture, which was Greek, right? So Plato's a very famous Greek philosopher, and he would say things like this. He would say that he would make a distinction between the reality of the one God, or the one. He would call it, he didn't use the word God, but he's referencing a divinity of, okay, and he believes in the soul, okay. So, but he would also say that the gods and goddesses of the Greeks are just myths. So even he would make that distinction again. You know, he would say the population is not too bright, so they believe in these gods and goddesses. But he himself is talking to his students, and he's basically talking about forms. You know, so that seem to live in these other dimensions. Like this table. Let's go back to this table that we're talking around right now. He would say that this table is the instantiation of the form table, and that there's this table that actually exists somewhere. It's this place where numbers exist, like the number 2.
Sorry.
Okay, so we use the number 2 mathematically, therefore it exists. But have you ever seen a real one? Have you ever seen the real 2? No.
No.
Okay, so but where does it exist? So he says that tables. So he was also talking about things that, you know, he says are real, making a distinction between the people, and by the way, he got this from Socrates, his mentor, who was killed by Athens because he would say such things. People don't like to be told that what they believe in is not real, right?
Yeah. By the way, his idea of the form.
Believe.
You're just making me realize
I
how
apologize.
incredible was that somebody like that was able to come up with that. I mean, that idea became a myth. That the idea of forms, right? That permeated probably the most influential set of ideas in the history of philosophy, in the history of ideas.
Philosopher Chris Payne.
Yeah, I mean, Plato, we know him for a reason, right?
Yeah. So let's say that we're not. It's a gray area between religious and myths, and maybe not even.
It is gray.
Yeah. So how's that idea with like little Plato start and permeate through all of society?
how does that happen? Okay, so there are different ways that religions work. So a lot of people would call the UFO narrative today and this is what I talk about in my book, like a myth, right? The UFO myth. But a lot of people believe in it, okay? So how do these things work? Well, what I did was I took... there's Ann Taves at UC Santa Barbara. She's a pretty well-known academic who studies religion. And she has this building block definition of religion, like it builds, okay? And so she says there are no religious experiences or mythic experiences. There are experiences, and then they get interpreted as religious or mythic, okay? And so I use that with the UFO narrative. So I take and I compare it to the religious narrative. So basically what happens...
Wow. This is really interesting.
Is that a person generally has a very intense experience. It could be with something that they see in the sky, a being, that they see, like Moses in the burning bush or something like that. They tell other people, okay?
Moses in the burning
believe them
bush?
because they say, that guy, let's take you. Okay, Lex. Okay, so you're playing, some of your music. Jimi Hendrix shows up out of the blue. So Jimi Hendrix, who does electric church stuff, right? The electric church movement. So he shows up.
I was sorry for a small tangent. I'm not aware of. I apologize if I should be. I'm just know how to play all of the songs. Electric church. Is this a thing?
Yeah. It's Jimi Hendrix's thing. Yeah. So
that was like a philosophy of his or what?
Yes. So he thought it was like a mission for him, like he was a missionary, and he was like doing the electric church. It was through his mission of music that he was actually impacting the spiritual. And I think you have to read it.
And she got the electric
wow, that's so cool to know that there's like a philosophy there.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's ever written anything.
He's spoken about it many times.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Need to actually do some research here. Wow, that adds another level
Philosopher
of depth. That's
Chris
awesome.
Payne.
Okay, so
I'm a black hole.
Yeah, Hendrix.
One of his songs.
Yeah.
He shows up.
What's your favorite Hendrix song, by the way?
Oh, that's a hard one. I like Castles in the Sand. It's a sad one, but I like it.
Whoa.
So I'm playing something. And
yes.
I show up.
And all of a sudden, boom, just like Elvis does
Lex.
for people.
Lex.
Hendrix shows up, all right? And
What's
then
Lex?
you're
Yeah, I'm
amazed. And he
Hendrix,
tells you
sorry.
something
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
very, very significant. And he says, you need to tell other people this, okay? So then, like,
Listen,
okay.
no, listen.
Yes.
I cannot
And
tell you
start-
guys
and because
anything.
people
You can't be
believe
my
you,
messenger.
And because you are a person of,
I don't know who I
credibility,
can trust. I don't
people
know you
believe
guys
you.
at all.
And so all of a sudden a movement starts, okay?
A movement?
Hendrix-
No, call
it's
me.
Hendrix 2 or something like that. We call it something.
What do you mean,
The next
yo?
iteration of Hendrix.
How is
right?
you guys
Hendrix
just so
lives,
ignorant?
But he lives as this vibration. And only Lex can,
And Hendrix started what religion?
Vibration, okay. So, like, this is how religion started.
This is how you guys are so
teach your audience
unprofessional.
who are religious.
And
I'm
I'm not
actually
trying to show you guys how to start a
This is
religion.
how religions
Get the
start.
fuck
They
over
start with,
religions.
First off, a
Jesus.
contact experience. Not all of them, but a
Wow.
portion of them.
I can't believe you guys just got stirred up over this. How unprofessional. How unprofessional.
And they go and they tell other people. And then those people tell
Who the fuck am I going to tell?
And then something gets written about it. Okay?
Who's
and then it
gonna
becomes,
write?
Because it's a charismatic movement, people become affected by it.
Who's going to write?
And if too many people are affected by it, an institution
There is
steps
a
in
library
and tries
in
to
my
control the
town.
narrative.
In my town.
So this is
There's
what
a
you
library
call
in my town.
beginning of a religion or a myth, a very powerful myth.
This
And
is
so
a
it's almost
religion
like
in my
a
town.
star, right? A
And
star is born.
I would
Okay?
like
Yeah.
to
When you say
help,
institution,
and
do
I
you
hope
mean
if you
some
guys
other
actually, yeah,
organization
I
that's already
apologize.
powerful
Wow.
for
Yes.
someone to become overpowered by this new
No,
movement.
no,
Yes,
I'm really
absolutely.
trying
It's
to do
usually
really.
governments.
I
It's
can
usually,
I can use you guys'
so,
help.
I have a
didn't
couple
mean that.
examples. I use the example
Maybe?
of the Christian church in my book because I'm most familiar with the history of Christianity.
Christian
and
Payne.
Christianity, was started by this Jewish man, and it was a movement that he was a very powerful, charismatic person. Other people believed in him, and then his followers talked about him, and then usually early Christians before the 300s were generally people who were disenfranchised because he had a pretty radical idea that humans should have dignity, And this was pretty radical during that time. So women who didn't have dignity and, slaves who didn't have dignity at the time converted to Christianity.
To vote for what? Vote for what?
So what happened was that all of a sudden...
Who's doing most of the work?
It became this belief system that was undercurrent. And then Constantine, who was an elite...
Who's doing most of the work?
Had an experience.
And allowed them to just, get there. Because obviously they have wars and fights and militaries and the books and shit written.
And
my dad...
and people who were powerful with him decided that their idea, this is the Council of Nicaea now, decided that there was one form, and they called it universal, the one form of Christianity, and this should be it. And so they kind of took out all the other denominations of Christianity and different forms of it. So you can see that a very, very powerful set of beliefs put a culture on fire, right? And so
when
how
did
did
this happen?
They had to deal with that fire somehow.
Oh, whoops.
And so they narrativized it. They decided, how do we interpret this? And they interpreted it as they wished, but that wasn't the only interpretation of Christianity. I have another example. In the Catholic Church, a lot of times...
And where is this even in relevance to? Where are you talking about?
She's a nun, and she's Polish. And
the origins of Christianity, as if I know right where exactly I'm talking about it.
Many experiences actually of Jesus, and she saw Jesus with rays coming out of his heart.
Location
and basically
of
she called this his divine mercy.
I go to
and it became
places in China where they're just ashamed, and there's these
Church was not
200 people
and so they
of
did
like
everything
100 years trying to actually just keep it there, and it's like, what the hell? Whoa, they do this. They really, people do this. I get it,
and so
but
they
wow.
were very successful in trying to keep her quiet, and she died. Years later, John Paul II, Polish, sainted her and created the Divine Mercy Devotion, which is worldwide
is there any
now,
American popes?
and millions of people. But do you see how they completely controlled it?
So fascinating.
No, what?
It starts with a single, said, contact experience.
Yes.
Experience is the key word.
America is like my shit, dude. Get to know me.
Experiences are
I got mad video. Oh my goodness.
So
I'm crazy American dude USA. I'm crazy American
I
dude.
think for the most part, there are legitimate experiences that people have. Why would someone want to put themselves through what they go through? Like,
I
why
know
would
what
Jesus
I'm trying
want
to
get
do this.
crucified? I mean, that's a pretty nasty way to
I'm
die.
ready for it.
Why would Faustina bring this upon herself? The people that I meet who said that they've seen UFOs, that most of them don't want to be known because of the ridicule that goes along with it. So I honestly
I want to be known. I want all
people
that. I'd love to just walk
maybe not
around and
stable
bless
and
people with
would
just
like
my
the attention.
presence
But for the most part,
and
normal
uplift
people
them
don't
for
want
like
this
months.
attention.
Yeah. All right. Oh no.
Are you still using Google?
God was not. I can't even. Lex.
Goja.
Philosopher Chris Payne. Diana, you're doing really good work. Diana, I really like the way Diana is coming across. This is
famously,
amazing.
one of the many famous things he said is that God is dead.
Yes.
What do you think he meant? Do you think he was right?
Okay, good. I love this question. No one asks me about Nietzsche.
Misha. I got a friend named Misha.
First, actually, I do think,
Shout
and I
out
could be
Russia.
corrected and probably will be in all the comments.
Yeah.
First, Nietzsche, it's true, wasn't the first to say God is dead. I think Hegel said it, okay? No one reads Hegel. He's like so difficult to read that it's impossible. Okay?
Same with Heidegger, as you mentioned.
I love
English
him, but
or?
he's really hard to read. So Nietzsche's basically said God is dead. And let me give you the context for him saying that. He also said this. He said there was only one Christian, and he died on the cross. Okay?
Philosopher Chris Payne.
So he despised Christianity. And he said that...
I'm K.
Absolutely.
I'm
yeah,
anti.
but again, he believed in Jesus, and he believed Jesus was.
Oh, he was a yogi. He was a yogi out east. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
He did
So he
stuff.
believed
I
in
think.
morality.
I'm
Yes,
pretty
he
sure. You
absolutely
gotta
did,
check.
yeah.
Yeah, you gotta put in check the whole
And
world on
he
that.
basically was
The
making
whole
a
world on that.
statement about God is dead. He said, and he was right. He was basically saying that in the century in which he lived, and he died, I think, in 1900. Again, I could be wrong about that, so I just want to say that I believe he died in 1900. Okay, so he's writing in the 1800s, and he's basically saying God is dead and we killed him. Okay, so he's making a historical statement that at that point in time, with science just kind of getting better and industrialization happening, the idea of this thing beyond what we know as material reality is dead. So the substrate of Western civilization is dead. That's what Nietzsche is saying, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And he basically says, with that comes the Übermensch, okay, which is the superhuman. And he says, there aren't many of them. He says, but they're going to come. And he also talks about the philosophers of the future. And he's speaking and writing to them, is my belief. So he's basically telling you and me, because we're now the philosophers of his future. Yeah, he's basically telling us, this is what's happening now, and look what it has done. He says now everything is possible, all manner of terrible evil, because no one has the belief in God anymore.
Oh,
The
you
belief
gotta
that
stay
there is,
strapped in some
that
places,
there is
though.
an afterlife.
Shit.
You asked about an afterlife. So with this kind
the
of
cut.
belief in a morality comes this belief, you can have morals without God. Okay, people do. But what Christianity is this idea that you will reap what you sow. So if people don't believe that anymore, what will happen?
Whoa, what?
And so that's what he's basically saying, is that
Reap what you
the
sow?
basic anchor for Western society is now gone.
Is agriculture.
You think he was
Yes,
right?
agriculture.
Absolutely right.
Agriculture.
But then again,
Hey,
what do you
hey,
think if we brought him back to life?
Well,
he read
Yep.
American Cosmic, your book,
Apologize.
and he tweeted about it, right?
Oh, I already rolled one
Writing
up.
a review maybe for I don't know what they post, for New York Times. He'd be an editorial writer with a
New
blue
York.
check mark on Twitter.
I'm philosopher Chris Payne.
What do you think he would say about this idea
In
that
my
you
mom's
present
basement.
That's a grander idea of religion, and
Oh, well.
Like religiosity, like this new
Religiosity.
form.
I
Yeah.
am
Would
I
that
am
kind
the
of
living
reverse
black
the
hole.
idea
I
that
am the
God is
living
dead?
black hole. Philosopher Chris
because it
Payne.
would bring up this
When you
idea
come close to
of
me, you see
external
my light.
intelligences that are not human, which is basically a lot of religions talk about that, right? There are bodhisattvas, there are angels.
Oh, no, yo.
Types of non-human intelligences that religion makes space for. So what I'm basically saying in American Cosmic is these new things are within the realm of UFOs and UAPs. So I think Nietzsche would say that that's a progressive adaptation of religion, is what I would hope he would say. Nietzsche, however, is unpredictable, I think. I couldn't predict him.
No.
So I would
Oh
say
my
that it would
gosh.
be my hope.
You guys
that
are
he would say,
unpredictable. I literally do
is
this all
an
day, every
accurate
day.
representation of a move into a new type of religion. And it's adaptive, therefore progressive.
Philosopher
You'd probably
K.
be
Payne
uncomfortable reading a
8.0.
book by a brilliant female professor.
Who happens also to be short. I don't know if you read that.
Short is relative.
He said some pretty nasty things about short women.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, Nietzsche. He should be canceled. No, please don't cancel Nietzsche. You have to take people in the context of their time. Although I'm pretty sure in his time he was also an asshole.
He was.
At one
assholes are
point I
people too.
was, yeah.
Okay.
Just bad ones.
Nah, I didn't understand what I was doing. I mean, like, yeah, I'd stir people up and shit. Like, I was a little fuck when I was younger, and I knew I was doing, and I knew sometimes I'd get away with it, but long gone are those days. It's just like,
You're going to have to get used to.
I can't describe the experience I live with, but it's genuinely like, you know, my goals, yeah, genuinely what I was trying to say is my goal is like to kind of yeah, more or less be able to speak more with my heart instead of all over the place to cycle around. But you know, all these things come from my heart because it's just that's the right nature of how we should conduct communication. And yeah, you know, speaking from the heart is like it comes in wavelengths, but you know, when you're really tuned in, it's like, yeah, like full blast conscious mode from here. Go. Don't even need anybody.
Through American Cosmic and in general, you've interacted with much of the UFO community. You mentioned ufologists. By the way, is it ufologists or is it ufologists?
It's ufologists.
Ufologists.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what is a ufologist?
Oh, nice. It's Diana.
And second of all, what have you learned about this community of ufologists, or also as you refer to them as the Invisibles, or the members of the Invisible College, or just in general people who study UFOs from the different, all the different kinds of groups that study UFOs?
Sure. Generally, what I found is that
the Invisibles,
they are, okay, so people who are interested in UFOs from like being a kid, you know, and seeing some cool movie like Star Wars or something, and then they become interested and then they study it as best they can, UFOs or UAPs. They're generally honest group of people who are using their tools. There are generally two types of them. There are those who believe in the nuts and bolts, like the physical craft, and they believe that these are things from other planets. Okay, so that's like the ET hypothesis. You know, I'm sorry, ET hypothesis. ETH is what we call it. Yeah, sorry about that.
So this is like there's an actual spaceship, like a
ET
like
had
akin, but
a nasty
much
phrase
more
in it.
advanced than
Penis
the rockets
breath.
we use now.
Yeah,
I cried.
And,
they have
there's
advanced
some kind of not necessarily biological, but something like biological organisms that travel on these spaceships.
So this would be like what To the Stars Academy is trying to decipher, like how, you know, how do they do it? You know, maybe we could use that technology, the propulsion and things like that. They look at the rocket technology. Okay, so there are those. And then there are people who believe that it's more consciousness based. Okay, so these are your two types of ufologists who are known. And these are people who we know about. Then I found that there are people who are, quote unquote, I call them the Invisibles, because Jacques Vallée in the 70s, he and I think actually Alan Hynek, his colleague, quoted, this is a Francis Bacon thing, by the way. It goes back to the early modern time period when scientists could be killed for basically trying to go outside what the church or the government institution determined was dogma. And so they had to be really careful. So he called it the Invisible College.
So
Hynek took that term
against like
and
that now?
reused it, or what do you call it? Repurposed it. So he repurposed it. So that they were still talking to each other, though. So what I found to be the case was that there was a group of people who were scientists, but were not on the internet. You know, to people today, and students of mine in particular, and my own
because
kids,
it's
actually,
the negative 1/3. I'm fucking smoking weed. I'm controlled by the devil right now.
Yes, of course,
I'm smoking weed, and I got this negative 1/3 spin in my corpse. I'm stoned,
are not on the internet,
and I'm focusing on certain shit, and that's exactly why. And when you bring up things in 3 like that,
people who are studying, at least their
you could associate it like that.
You might find them on the
Don't
internet,
get-
but you're
don't
going to
get
find that they're
tripping
part of the
over
bullying
this
league or
idea.
something like that, right? You will
It's
not
because
find
we use
that
numbers.
they are actually engaged
You gotta
in
fix the way we
research
use
about
numbers.
this
It's
topic. Okay?
really-
And so I
wow.
called them the Invisibles because I was surprised to find them. And I thought, well, this is no longer the Invisible College because these people are not even talking to each other. And that's where I reference this movie Fight Club. In it, you have an invisible, okay? And his name is Tyler Durden. And he's incredible. He does incredible things. He's like a person who should not exist, right? Because he does so many things that are amazing. And so I found a person like that, and he's a real person. He's partially on the internet, but nothing that he does around that topic of UFOs is on the internet. So I decided to call him Tyler D after Tyler Durden.
For the
And
D
so
hook.
these people, I've termed the UFO Fight Club because they work together, but they don't know. In fact, his boss doesn't know what he does. They don't talk to each other because, the first rule of Fight Club.
Same as the second, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't talk about
No,
Fight
you
Club.
don't do it.
Why do you have a sense that there's such a, I don't want to say fear, but a
Whoa.
principle?
What was the
of staying
second
out of the
thing? She
limelight?
lost it. You cut her off.
I think there's something real, and I think that the use of it could be dangerous for people.
Apologize,
Oh,
guys.
sorry. You mean like something
Apologize.
real? Like there's actual I don't. What's the right terminology
Yeah,
here to use?
let's just call it-
Alien technology.
No, not alien technology.
Ideas
just not the
about
right
technology
support
that
and,
are being explored that are dangerous if made public. That may be become dangerous.
mine
if
isn't
made
even
public.
public.
So I
that's
wouldn't
the
call
word.
you don't
Mine
have to
isn't
call it
even
alien,
public.
alien technology.
No
You
one
can call
follows
it
my
ideas
shit.
about alien technology because I don't know if it's actual alien technology or not. I honestly don't know. But I do know for a fact, because it's a historical fact, that Jack Parsons and Konstantin Tchaikovsky, who's Russian, believed in these things and believed that they were downloading this information. Whether or not they were, I mean, they definitely created the rocket technologies. That's true. How they did and whether their process was exactly what they said it was, I don't know. So this is the same thing today. So
Listen.
we've got some powerful technologies
I
going
could
on
sell
here.
this, yeah.
And, of course we have a military, and we have a military for a reason. Almost every government who needs a military has one. And so they're going to keep these the way they should be kept, in my interpretation. I mean, think about it. Everybody accepts the fact that we have a military. Almost everybody does. Why are they so upset then that the military keeps secrets?
Because
Yeah,
they
well,
treat
that's
everything
the nature
like
of things. And we can get into that whole thing. I tend to. I've spoken with the CTO of Lockheed Martin on this.
for the safety of public.
I obviously
What
read
they
and
say
think
in their
about war a
judgment.
lot. It's such a difficult question because this particular space of technology, there's a gray area that I think is evolving over time. I think nuclear weapons change the game in terms of what should and shouldn't be secret. I think there's already technology that will enable us to destroy each other.
Yo, philosopher.
So there's some sense in which some technology should be made public. This is the same discussion of, between companies.
If
Which
I'm
part
president,
of your
ain't
technology
nobody
should you
fucking with
made
America.
public through, like, for example, academic publications and all that kind of stuff. Like how the Google search engine works, PageRank algorithm, or how the different deep learning
Word of
there's
mouth.
pretty vibrant machine learning research communities within
The more your
Google,
voice
Facebook,
is
and so on.
spoken into the
And they release a
universe.
lot of different ideas. It's an interesting
Philosopher
question, like
Chris Payne, Lex.
how dangerous
what
is
up?
it to release some of the ideas? I think it's a gray area that's constantly changing. I do also think it's super interesting. I
Ideas,
wonder
I'm
if you could
taking them from
elaborate
other
on it a little
people.
bit, that there's this
I haven't released my
gray
ideas
area
yet.
between
Oh,
what's actually
Oh.
real in terms of alien technology
for real though.
and
Like,
the belief of it.
I really
when
do
held
this.
in the minds of really
No,
brilliant
I really-
people, that they ultimately may produce the same kind of result in terms of being able to create new technologies that are human usable. Like, is there in your mind
I
they're
could.
one and the same? Is like believing in alien craft and actually being in possession of an alien craft?
I don't think they're the same, no. Belief is powerful. Okay.
Yes, but if I'm in fucking hands of an alien
New Age
craft,
communities, you know,
let me
people
see
think
that.
thoughts are things. Okay, that's been said. You know, thoughts are things. You can make them happen, kind of thing. Believe in them enough.
I want to touch
It is
that.
true that if I believe I can run a 540-mile, I'll do it.
Ooh,
Okay, and I
yeah.
probably will do it. And I've done
Yeah.
it before, actually.
Hey.
Much younger, but I did it.
Looted.
So, but my coach is the one that instilled that belief in me, right?
Yeah.
And so, but can I run like a 1 minute mile? No. Okay. So I guess, does that answer your question? Like, there's only so far belief goes.
I could
in
help you run a
generating
1 minute mile.
reality.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what, just having listened to Jacques Vallée, it seemed like reality was not as
prosthetic
important for the scientific exploration
legs.
of the concept of the
Get
alien
them
technology.
bitches running.
I could
yeah.
be wrong, but this is what I think Jacques getting at.
1 minute.
There are other ways to access places
Wear
in
different
reality
clothes.
other than what we
No
consider
tie.
physical.
Right.
That's this
The
consciousness,
ties fly
okay?
though.
So
Keep it
like
by.
I said, so religious studies is among other things. It's looking at visionary experiences. All right, so people do have visionary experiences. They did without drugs, you know. They did with drugs. They do with drugs. They do.
Oh,
many
more
have
people
them
without drugs
today.
do it because
and
they're just weird.
oftentimes those visionary experiences correspond to each other. Now, how do we make sense of that? So
How do you make
these
sense of
places actually
that?
exist.
I could
In a sense,
explain
I
a
think they
little
do.
bit more.
And so I think that, you know, let's take that very famous case of a Virgin Mary apparition in Fatima, where I think there was like a lot of people, thousands and thousands, if not like I think 50,000 or something like that, a lot of people
I'm just being a little
gathered
outrageous.
to see what's now called the miracle of Fatima, which was the spinning
Some of
the
these
sun.
things just get me.
Well, a lot of
really,
people saw
really
different things, but they
fired
all
up
saw some
because
kind of thing.
I'll be
Okay, so
honest,
they all saw
America's
different things,
fucking
but it was
huge, but I've never actually
something
been to
happened,
the South Pole
Okay, so I guess the question is,
or Norway, where they're talking
what are
about.
these places where we
They're not
access
talking about Norway.
what I'd call like non-physical realities?
I'm talking about Russia.
Where we actually do get information. We do get, like, who could say that Jack
And-
Parsons didn't get information from doing these rituals and accessing these? We
How
have to
hit-
say that he
there's
actually
two guys that had
because
some
we
theories
see the
about
results of physical results. The same thing with Tyler, and that's why I put
UFOs.
Tyler in this camp with this tradition with Jack Parsons. I say that Tyler
Jack Parsons,
is
philosopher,
getting
Chris
these
Payne.
what he calls downloads, and you can see the results of them physically. He sells them on the NASDAQ. He makes millions of dollars from them. They help people. I've seen people who they've helped.
So let's take a step back.
Yo, you guys with me, or
to,
should I start
Roswell.
with
We
something?
talked
I
about
could
it a little
actually
bit.
just like.
What's your sense
stop.
about that whole time of Roswell and just Area 51 and the sightings?
Wow,
and
cool.
also the follow-on mythology around those sightings.
Mythology.
That's with us today.
All right.
Cool.
So
Where do I get started?
You guys got a
well,
lot of water.
I mean, it is
Shit.
mythology here, right? The mythology of Roswell. It's very religious-like in the sense that there's a pilgrimage to Roswell people make, and
On
they
the
go
internet?
to.
What?
There's
No.
a festival there as well, like a religious festival. You could get little kitschy stuff like you can get at a religious festival there. So it's very much like a place of pilgrimage where a hierophany occurred.
The
And a
Invisibles.
hierophany is basically contact with non-human intelligence. Okay, so non-human intelligence is thought to have contacted humans or crashed at this place in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, what's fascinating is that I begin my book by going out to a crash site in New Mexico.
Yes.
I have to get blindfolded with
Me, because I'm just amazing.
well, to tell you the truth, the story is that I'm with Tyler, who's an invisible, and he wants to show me a place in New Mexico where a crash happened. And he says that
That's
he
sick,
thinks
Tyler.
that I need to see physical evidence because I don't believe. And so I said, I'll go, but I'm going to bring a friend of mine.
Yeah,
and he
Tyler,
said, no,
what
you
up?
have to go alone. He goes, it's a place that is on government-owned property.
Dang.
And it's a no-fly zone. And when you go, you'll be blindfolded.
Yeah.
And I said, I
Whoa, that's some real stuff. You get
So he
blindfolded.
said, well, who do you
whoa.
want to bring? I just had met this university scientist who's very well known, and I call him James in my book. And I
James
asked,
Harden.
And I had a feeling James would definitely want to do this. And I asked James, and he said, "I'll go tomorrow." Okay.
University.
So I suggested this to Tyler, and Tyler said, "Absolutely not."
Tyler, what? He didn't want to go to
look up James, and he's going to say yes, because if anybody can figure out what this material is that you're going to go look for, it's going to be James. He has the instruments, and so Tyler did, in fact, look him up, and finally said, "Okay, you can go." So we both head out there, and we get blindfolded, and Tyler takes us out there. It takes about 40 minutes outside of a certain place in New Mexico. So in terms of Roswell, this is what I can say, is that according to Tyler, there were about 7 crashes out in the 1940s in New Mexico in various places.
New Mexico. Cool.
We went to one of them, according to Tyler.
Philmont.
At the time, I was completely an atheist.
Philmont, New Mexico.
So we were out there. We had specially configured metal detectors for these metals. And we did find these. Okay.
U.S. geography.
And they've since been studied by various scientists, material scientists, so forth. And I believe Jacques talked about not those particular ones, but others on the Joe Rogan show. They're anomalies. So there are scientists. I'm not a scientist, so I can't weigh in on whether I just believe. These people I believe, because they're well-known scientists.
What do you mean they're not anomalies? So
they are non-anomalous.
Oh, anomalous in terms of the materials that are naturally occurring on Earth.
Yes.
Okay, so there's some kind of inklings of evidence that that something happened in Roswell in terms of crashes of alien technology. Now, what else is there to the mythology? So there's some crashes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of epic.
It's pretty epic, yeah.
Yo, crash? Whoa, yo.
What else? Like what?
Debris,
what
crashes,
are we supposed to take away from this?
Right, yeah. So it's weird. Okay, so
sparks fly.
So in religious studies, like I said, we call it a hierophany, which is the meeting of a non-human intelligent thing, whatever it is, an angel, a god,
right? That word.
Or an alien with humans.
Foreign
and that's
substance,
place,
like
okay?
super foreign, yo.
So New Mexico becomes folded into the mythology of this new religion, is what I call a new type of religion, of the UFO. And it becomes ground zero for this new mythology. Just like Mecca is the place where Muslims go. They have to go, right, at least once in their lives. It's a pilgrimage place now. So in my book, that's how I tell it. Now, what about Roswell in the public imagination? Obviously, according to Annie Jacobson, who's good, she's a great author, investigative journalist. She's written about Roswell too. I don't agree with all of what she comes up with, but part of it is that there's a lot of military stuff going on there that is classified, and there's a reason why you can't get in, and nor would you want to, right? So,
and they talk about it all the fucking time on the internet.
I don't believe that it has to do with ETs, frankly.
Google images.
But in the imaginations
names.
of Americans, Roswell is that place. But I went to a different place, and apparently there are several places in New Mexico. Now, strangely enough, I traveled back to New Mexico at the very end chapter of my book, but it's not. I don't go there physically. I go there through the story of a Catholic nun who actually believes that she bilocated to New Mexico in the 1600s. So it was very strange. And I was at the Vatican at the Space Observatory when I made that connection, that she probably went to she believed she went to this very place that I had gone.
Can you elaborate on a little bit?
Praying to God that I make
what does it mean to go to that place? So
her?
Yeah, for her. I mean, it's just, we're kind of breaking down the barrier between what it means to be in a place and time. Right?
Right. I agree with you. This is the field of religious studies. So, and again, I don't say it's true in my book. I just say it's a very strange
coincidence. Where's James at? And Tyler, would you go inside?
I'm at the Vatican Observatory. In fact, I'd finished my book, But while I was at the Vatican Observatory, I was there with Tyler.
I like this.
And we were
She's
looking
good.
at the records, they're called the trial records, but they're the canonization records of these two saints. Each was said to have done amazing things. One was Joseph of Cupertino, who levitated. Okay?
Whoa.
Is said to have levitated. The
Oh,
other
yo,
was
Maria
of Agreda from Spain. They're contemporaries in the 1600s, who was said to have been able to bilocate, which is to be in two places at once. Okay, so this is a belief in Catholicism that certain very holy people can do these kinds of things, like levitate, which, by the way, is also associated with UFO abductions. You know, people get levitated out of their beds,
Kendrick Lamar vibes.
So we were sent there by a billionaire who was interested
positive
in
spins and one negative one,
and bilocation. And since I could get into the Vatican, and I knew the director of the Vatican Observatory, both Tyler and I were able to go to the secret archives and look at the canonization records, and then go to Castle Gandolfo, which is about an hour from the Vatican, where the first observatory, the space observatory of the Vatican is. The second one is in Arizona, and it has a much larger telescope. So we went, and Brother Guy gave me the keys to the archive. I said, look at anything you want. And I got to see a lot of stuff by Carl Sagan, by the way. I know you talked about, it was awesome.
Carl
so they have a whole
Sagan.
section on the search for extraterrestrial life. And they don't, by the way.
How awesome is that?
It was awesome, yeah. So we got to stay there. They have a scholars' quarters.
Yo.
And so they had two. And so Tyler stayed in one and I stayed in the other.
Oh, no.
Brother Guy probably shouldn't have been so nice to me and given me the keys, because I when I got home, we were there for 2 weeks. When I got home, I got this frantic phone call from him, and he basically said, Diane,
no
he goes,
way.
do you remember where you put the original Kepler? And so I had this Kepler, right?
Fuck.
And so I misplaced
it. Oh, my goodness. This guy?
Luckily, I remembered where it went. I was like, oh gosh, thank goodness I found it. But he'll probably change the rules of the Vatican Observatory after my visit. So Maria is, she's actually in the history of our country, in that she first wrote a cosmography of what she said was the spinning Earth. And this was in the 1600s. And that's her first book. And she wrote that. And then she said that she was transported on the wings of angels to the New World. And she said that she met a culture of people, and she basically told them about the faith of Catholicism, okay? And then what happened was that the people that she described the fauna, she described the people and everything like that. And so there were actually missionaries there. And when they went to try to convert some of the people who already lived there, apparently they already knew a bunch of stuff. And they said, how did you know all this stuff? And they said, this lady in blue came and told us. And they said, did it look like this? And they showed them, they obviously didn't have a photograph, but they had a picture of a sister, a nun. And they say, yeah, she wore similar clothes, but she was much younger, right? And these guys were, thought that was weird. But when they went back to Spain, they found that this woman had been doing that in her mind, had been traveling.
I mean, I don't know what to make of it. There's so many things that are sort of forcing you to kind of go outside of, I'm of many minds. I have most of my days spent with very rigorous scientific kind of things, and even engineering kind of things. And then I'm also open-minded, and just the entirety of the idea of extraterrestrial life forces you to think outside of conventional boundaries of thought, current scientific thought. Let's put it that way. And your story right now is certainly an example
it's
of that.
Freaking you out.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's a nice way to put it.
Hey everyone, it is that time of the week again for our live conversation where As part of your daily equation, I'm happy to cover anything that is equation related. And of course, since equations are related to everything, that means everything is game. So truly feel free to ask me about anything that's on your mind. You know me. If I don't know the answer, I'm straightforward. I tell you. If I have something to say on the subject, I'm happy to offer it. And let's begin as we sometimes do. I see Luis has already noted that he is in our conversation from Mexico, but I do like to see the various places where everybody is from. So if you don't mind just sort of saying where you're from, I would love to see that. And then as those countries roll by, I will be all too happy to start finding the first questions and get moving on things. All right, so what do we have here? What am I going to begin with? There's one question I really want to begin with, and I didn't have a chance on YouTube to locate who it was that asked it. But somebody asked in one of the last two sessions about what it means when people say that time is curved, right? In the general theory of relativity and special relativity too, of course, we know that space and time are all together. They're blended into this uniform continuum that we call space-time. So if we learn that space is curved in the general theory of relativity, then we must know that time is curved too. But you know, we all have an image for what curved space is, but what does curved time mean? And the answer to that is less mysterious than it sounds. It's not like you have a Dali-esque like clock that sort of warps time in some literal spatial way. Of course, a clock is warped in space. It's not itself warped in time. But when we say that time is warped, we simply mean that the rate at which time passes at different locations need not be the same. And in particular, what we learn in the general theory of relativity is that if you have a massive body that exerts the force of gravity or curves the environment around it, the space-time environment, what that means is the closer you get to that body, the slower clocks tick. So if you had a clock, say, that is at the top of the Empire State Building, you have another clock on the ground floor there at 34th and 5th Avenue, whatever the right address is, I think that's correct. Then the clock at the top of the Empire State Building will tick off time a little more quickly than the clock at the bottom of the Empire State Building. So time is warped in that sense. You know, if you have a ruler that's warped, then different parts of the ruler will measure different distances between the same two locations, right? That's what a warped, non-uniform ruler would do. If you have time that's warped, then clocks will not measure the same elapsed time between two events by virtue of this warped or curved nature of time. Now, for the example of the Empire State Building, you'd say, well, why don't I know about that? The reason, of course, you all absolutely already know as well. The amount of time warpage, time curvature between the top and the bottom of the Empire State Building is tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of a second. We just don't notice it. But if you took that same example and you put the Empire State Building at the edge of a black hole, then the clock near the edge of the black hole, closer to the source of gravity, would tick off time far more slowly than the clock farther away. And that would, in principle, be a measurable time difference, right? I think as mentioned before, in Interstellar, you saw that example directly as the astronauts that went down to the planet that was closer to the black hole than the crew member who stayed up in the ship. They just spent a couple hours in that environment, but time is ticking off so slowly for them, so quickly compared to the clock on the mothership, that when they returned to the ship, their fellow crew member had aged like 20 years, where they had only aged a couple of hours. So that's what we mean by curved time. All right, moving onward. What else do we have here? So Salim Yagi says, Dr. Green, thank you for amazing words. Is it scientifically correct to say that gravity is due to a field property of space-time, or is it just pure objective geometric property of space-time? And it's a very good question, because we physicists freely go back and forth between the language of a gravitational field and the language of the geometry of space-time. And I would encourage you to feel comfortable going back and forth between those languages as well. In fact, you should feel comfortable using the standard Newtonian language as well, where you talk about a force of gravity, one object pulling on another. Because depending on the problem at hand, one or another language can give you the greatest insight. Einstein's general theory of relativity language is indeed one in which we think about gravity as nothing but the curvature of space-time. So why do objects move in interesting trajectories under the old Newtonian language of the force of gravity? Einstein's answer: they move in these interesting trajectories, these orbits, because they are sliding along these grooves, these indentations, these valleys in the geometrical structure of space-time.
You talking to me?
So there's a sentence where I use the Newtonian gravitational force language, which is also the Newtonian gravitational field language, and also the Einsteinian.
There is a shortage of 500,000 machine learning and artificial intelligence professionals. Keeping this in mind, the university...
Sorry, guys, I gotta be back.
You wrote the book American Cosmic, UFOs, Religion, Technology. What was the goal of writing this book? What, maybe we'll mention it. We have already mentioned it many times, but in this little space of a conversation, can you say maybe what is the key insight that you found that lingers with you to this day from the process, the long process of putting this book together?
Sure. Just like with my book on purgatory, I went into the research thinking that it would be something that it was entirely not. It ended up being something completely different. And I think that's good. I think that people who do research are very excited actually when their research surprises them. Mm-hmm. So I was happily surprised by my purgatory book to learn that it was a place, and so I went into American Cosmic being a non-believer in UFOs entirely. And I came out being agnostic, okay? Kind of believer.
Yeah.
So,
but agnostic, sort of open to the mysteries of the world.
Yes. And I didn't think that, first of all, I knew that the government was part of the situation. I just didn't know how much. Mm-hmm. And so I learned that quickly and acclimated to it, accepted it, and noted that indeed, Horatio, the world is much more mysterious than we think it is. It's more mysterious. There are more mysteries in this life than your philosophy provides for.
So, in a sense, American Cosmic is about the mysteries of the modern life as encapsulated by the realm of technology and the realm of alien intelligences.
Yes, I think that.
Phosphor Christine.
I think that. I mean, I'd have to go off record as a professor and talk personally. As a person, I do think that
satellite rays where I'm smoking weed.
There are mysteries of which
because I didn't buy this at a store.
And if it's something as powerful as non-human intelligence, whether or not it's from another planet, extraterrestrial, or it happens to be from like another dimension or something else, I think that this is going to get the attention of institutions of power. And indeed, I think that's what has happened.
Yo.
Although
shout out my boy 1-800-Puppies.
people have had interactions with these things, it appears to me historically.
Don't do that.
For a long time, as long as humans have existed, I would
Don't
imagine
go call 100,
that
100 my
indeed, this is something that's quite powerful and could change the belief structures of our entire societies, our civilization, basically.
So it's the same way that you're
Really?
talking. The
If you
belief
get
structures were
trolled?
strongly affected by religious beliefs throughout history.
Yes.
In the same way, this has the potential. It serves as a
Just
source
grab
of
her by the-
concern for the powerful because it can have very significant effects on
Huge
the
effects.
populace.
Yes.
Sniff children like Joe Biden. Not a good thing.
Well, hello and welcome. I am an optimistic human woman. Mountain breeze.
This will
or
be an
woman
interesting
Chanel.
thing. I really actually want to hear what they
Would
have
you?
to say
Wanna be
about
on the
this.
inside
I
or the
really
outside?
want to
What do
hear
you
what they
think?
have to say.
Call me Kat. Premieres tomorrow on Fox.
Do you think ultimately religion is good for human civilization?
Has
Let
it,
me
or-
maybe phrase it differently.
Yeah, sorry.
What's religion good for?
Philosopher
Okay.
Chris Payne.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Most people don't ask that. And I think it's the question to ask. Why do we still have religion? That's the question, right? Because scientists and others, scholars, humanists,
Because that
even
saves my ass in the
thought
cut in
that
Atlanta.
There's this thing called the secularization
the
thesis, and
Grams.
it's this idea that the more we progress rationally and we have better instruments
Yeah,
for understanding
wow.
our reality, the less religious we will be.
Huh,
But that's been
huh,
found to be
huh.
untrue. We're still very religious, okay? So why? Why is it around? Well, it's adaptive in some way, in my opinion. Many people would not agree
Amish.
with me, but I kind of see it as an evolutionary adaptation.
Amish
Now,
people
think
down
about
over the
religion,
road.
okay? Think about
Hit the
Christianity
bake
again,
sale
for one.
Sundays. Hit the bake
Here
sale
comes this
Sundays.
idea
Hit the
when
bake
you have
sale
this
Sundays.
ruthless empire called the Roman Empire, which litters its
No,
its
we don't have
roads
Amish.
with
Get the
crucified
fuck that out of
bodies
here. We
to
do
let
not
you
have
know,
Amish.
don't mess with us, okay?
Don't mess with
Here,
us,
all of a sudden, you
no.
have
It's
this guy
just
saying,
like
God is love.
you would see
Okay?
them. They
All right,
ride
that's
horses. Like
Okay,
what?
so why? Why does this take off? Well, it takes off because we're
Because you're
becoming
feeding me.
a
Sorry.
a colonial power. That means we're going into other countries,
Horses? No.
conquering them.
Yeah, my
We
Ferrari
are,
got
you know, how do we survive together as cultures
Tesla.
that don't clash? Well, we have to have a belief structure that allows us to, and I
Xi
think religions
Jinping.
function that way. Frankly,
So religions help us from
No,
also
Xi Jinping
Richard
only
Dawkins' meme idea. It allows us to explore a space of ideas, and that in itself is the
Are you
just like
Confucian?
evolution of ideas. And
Yeah.
religion is a powerful tool for us
it
to
is.
explore
Yeah,
ideas.
because you know,
Oh, how you
if I
did it.
believe that men have souls,
Do they?
yes, they do.
Oh, hell no. Well, when Trump shows his soul, y'all
We're
gonna
people,
try to
the
figure that
people,
out.
oh my, they don't want to.
Well, I still, in terms of souls, do believe cats don't have souls, but we'll
That's
never,
hilarious.
we'll never be able to confirm that.
Maybe if we get better instruments. You know, the soul instrument. You need to come up with that one, please.
What's a
For
cat?
cats,
Yeah, not just for cats, but for all animals and people in general.
for
You,
sure.
you can put them in like a little, you know, soul machine and find out what's the status of their soul.
Yes. You
That's
can.
funny.
What is
I
my
hope
cat?
will become a scientific discipline of consciousness, and consciousness is in some sense connected to maybe what the meaning of the word soul used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a fascinating open question, like what is consciousness and so on, that maybe we'll touch on in a little bit.
Just let
But yeah,
me
anyway,
impact
back
your
to our-
life, man. The
Religions being
Invisibles,
adaptive.
yo.
I think that Christianity probably helped us
Christian. Pain.
become better
Philosopher Chris
people to
Payne.
each other as we moved into a
Yeah,
more
yeah.
global society.
I can be nicer if you guys just let me know what you're doing and I can help. Oh, and also there was this the last time I went on set, I was gonna reply to you. I forget. I said.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Hoffman. He has this idea that in terms of
cats,
the distance we are from being able to know the reality, which is there, the physics reality, is we're actually really, 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 really far away from that.
Yeah.
So like it's, I think his idea is that we're basically like completely detached from it.
Yes.
What's your sense? How close are we to the reality? We'll talk about a bunch of ideas about our beliefs in technology and beyond. But in terms of what is actually real from a physical sense, how close are we to understanding that?
Pretty far. I'm going to use examples from what I do. Okay, so this idea that we're suspicious of what we actually think is real is not new. Of course, it goes back a long time, thousands of years, in fact. And philosophers, I'm not actually technically a philosopher, but I was one. I'm a professor of religious studies.
Yeah, but what do you introduce yourself at, like at a bar when the bartender asks, "What do you do?"
I never tell people what I do, especially on airplanes.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea. So generally, if they push, though, I say, I'm the chair of philosophy and religion, although I stepped down last year, so I'm no longer the chair. But I have like a master's degree in philosophy, and I was a philosophy major, and I still study philosophy, so I integrate it into my research. All right, so this idea that we can't know, we're suspicious of what we know, is called external world skepticism. That's the official philosophical name for it. Our faculties and our senses don't give us accurate perceptions of what is there, okay? Especially at a quantum level or a molecular level. I mean, that's just obvious. So, yes, so I think that the person you mentioned is correct in that. I think we're far away from it.
I think you're talking about our direct senses, but we have tools, measurement tools, from microscopes to all the tools of astronomy, cosmology, that give us a sense of the big universe and also the sense of the very small. Do you think there's some other things that are completely sort of other dimensions, or there's ideas of panpsychism that consciousness permeates all matter? There's like fundamental forces of physics we're not even aware of yet.
Oh, absolutely. I do think, and this is why I write about technology, and I mean that's actually what I specialize in, is belief in technology with respect to religion. So, in my opinion, thank goodness for technology, because where would we be without it? I mean, frankly, I think that it's like Marshall McLuhan was the person who said technology is like an extension of our senses, and I absolutely believe that to be true. I think that we're lucky that that Prometheus gave us technology, okay, and that we use it, and we're making it better and better and better and better, and that makes us more efficient.
Lucky. I know
makes us
what
more
I'm
efficient
doing.
as a species, and like my point is that I think that our instruments. I mean, I don't want to be a religious technologist, but our instruments will save us. I mean, they're already making life better for us.
Do you think it's important that they also help us understand reality more directly, more deeply?
I think directly is better than deeply. I think more directly is probably a more accurate term for what you're trying to, I think, ask me.
We set a goal to chase, to dream, to achieve. And once we set it,
What do you think about, in terms of this coevolution of the work around brain-computer interfaces and maybe Neuralink and and Elon, seeing Neuralink in particular as its long-term mission as a symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So, like giving a greater bandwidth channel of communication between technology, AI systems, and the biological neural networks of our human mind. What do you think about this idea of connecting directly to the brain in AI systems?
I mean, okay, I've listened to your podcast with Elon. I've listened to Elon before. He's very intelligent, obviously a super smart guy.
Elon.
I think this is already, I mean, not in the specific ways that he is doing it, but I think we are already doing that, okay? And I can give you some examples. And they're really trivial examples, but they do make the point, and this is one of them. So before he started this research on UFOs and UAPs and technology, I actually was looking at the effects of technology and in particular media on religion. And what I did was I was lucky to be asked to be a consultant for various movies, and one in particular I learned a lot from, and that was The Conjuring. So I was a history consultant for The Conjuring. It happens to be my field. It's Catholic studies, right? And you've got these people who are real people, and they're, exorcising demons and things like that. Okay, so I thought, wow, this is a great example for me. I didn't do it for the money. It doesn't pay well, but
fun.
I did it to learn, right?
Yeah.
So I work closely with the
$12 at Walmart,
screenwriters who
demon.
I work with now all the time. I work with them all the time now. And what I found was this. I found that as the most interesting part of the creation of this movie was the editing process, because they would use, it would go through editing, and they would use test audiences. And a lot of the test audiences would be like, there's like these things where they test their flicker rates and things like that, the eye flicker rates. And so, when it goes really intense, they go to UC Irvine and they do this thing called cognitive consumption, which is basically, cognitive consumerism, where they basically hook test audiences up to EKGs and they read their brains.
Yeah.
And they figure out which scenes create the most
arousal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they cut out all the other scenes. Okay. So what we're getting is we're getting like this drug when we go to the movies or when we do video games or when we watch. We're literally physiologically responding to our technologies. So we're already there. We're already interfacing with them physiologically. So that's my example. Now, the kind of thing that he's doing, Musk is doing with Neuralink, I say go for it. That's awesome. I hope he does it, I'm fascinated. I want it to happen. Why do I want it to happen? Because I think that, well, first, it's inevitable that it's going to happen. I also want to point out that Jacques Vallée was trying to get this done back in the 60s and the 70s. He was writing papers about, in fact, the ARPANET, the proto-internet, was called Augmentation of the Human Intellect. So we've been doing this for a while, okay? So props to Elon Musk, but we've been thinking about this for a good time. We've even been visioning it, okay? So there was a really interesting Jesuit priest, he was French, Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know if you know who he is. If not, he's fascinating. He was actually a soldier before he became a priest. And so he also saw what he called a biosphere. Now, this guy is talking in like the early 20th century, like the
26.
17, 19, that time period. And so basically he said and wrote about this thing called the noosphere. And he basically said there will be a point when we merge with our technology, and it's going to be somewhat like some kind of a biosphere. We have this atmosphere, and then we have the stratosphere, and it's going to be this biosphere, and we're all going to be hooked into it mentally. So we'll be able to communicate in a way in which we don't communicate now. So, that sounds so similar to the singularity.
Joe, Harold's chair's wide open. Now streaming on Disney Plus. I'm Joe.
Philosopher Chris Payne. Trying to get in touch with these guys.
You are a scholar of
love
religious
to delete
belief
this footage
or belief in
and
general.
just do it.
So the fascinating question: what do you think is the difference between our beliefs and objective reality? What is real? Period.
Sure. What is real? Easy question. So first, let me start with belief. So belief is generally, there are different definitions of belief, just as there are different definitions
Belief
of what
is
is
an
real.
art.
Okay. So for belief in my field, it would be attitudes toward something that dictate our actions. Okay. So we believe the sun is going to rise tomorrow. Therefore, we act as if it will rise tomorrow. All right. Beliefs can be wrong. For a long time, people believed, and actually some still do, that the earth was flat. Okay, well, that's obviously an erroneous belief. So beliefs can be wrong. Now, the bigger question that philosophers ask is this belief accurate toward what we consider to be objective reality? So now let me go to objective reality. So what is real? I don't think we can actually obtain a correct understanding of what is real. And in that sense, I have to refer to a philosopher again, and that would be Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant is one of he was basically in the 1750s, he wrote critiques of reason and things like that. So if you're a philosopher or have any kind of understanding of Western history, you know who he is. He had this idea that we can actually never get to the thing in itself. Okay, so he called that the noumenal, the thing in itself. He said, let's take this table, for instance, that you and I are talking across. So this thing is a table. You and I both know that. We assume it's real. We believe in it because we put our water on it, and then our water stays on it. Okay. However, can we know this thing in and of itself as a table? That would be what he then would call the phenomenal. How do we know that phenomena exists as we know it is? Okay, how do we know? We use our faculties, so we use our senses and things like that. But again, even our senses can be wrong. So I've been on committees just recently, this year, last year, for hiring professors in my department who are philosophers. And we're hiring metaphysicians and people who are thinking about the nature of reality. And basically, what I've learned from them, they're very.
I'd love to attend those faculty talks.
Yo, philosopher Chris Payne. I taught in China. I was a philosopher teacher in China. I had a lecture of 140 people. You guys should have saw it. It was lit. Taught them English. I threw them a soccer ball.
What
do they have?
No,
they have an actual belief. They're practicing metaphysicians.
I have been.
So what they do is they come and they're usually excellent philosophers from Harvard or USC or whatever. They come
New York.
And they give what's called a job talk. That's what every academic does, a job talk in order to get it. They talk to us about a department about what they do. And so it so happens that we need a metaphysician, and now we're hiring again for one. And so I've learned a lot about metaphysics in the last year, and this is what I've learned, that they use physics as a basis for understanding what we can know about what is real. And what is real is really difficult to pin down. And so your question is, what is belief? Well, belief, does it correspond to reality? That's the question I would ask. And first, we don't even know what is real. So the table, they would say, how do we know that the table even exists? Well, how do we differentiate it from the floor, for example? So these are the questions that philosophers are asking. No one else is, of course, but philosophers are asking these questions, and they have different answers for it. So I would say that it's very difficult to know what is real, and in fact, what I do usually is I paraphrase my friend and colleague, Brother Guy Consolmagno. He's a Jesuit priest who's also an astronomer, and he's the director of the Vatican Observatory. And so he says this, he's a very smart person. He says, well, truth is a moving target. So basically, to know what is real out there, like gravity or something like that, you've got to approximate it. And as human beings, we have senses to tell us what, at least so we don't get hurt, we're not going to fall off building or something like that. We have eyes to see and things like that. So we can approximate what reality is, but we're never going to get to it unless we develop better senses, okay? And I think that is what we are in the process of doing. We're developing better senses. We have telescopes, we have microscopes, we have, extensions of ourselves, which are now called technology, and we can get to a better understanding of what reality is and what the objective world is, and therefore our beliefs can be honed. So we can get better beliefs, more accurate beliefs. But can we get beliefs that actually correspond to reality? Not in any precise way, but in approximate ways.
You knew him, didn't you? Then you had that one little feeling.
Okay.
But you.
Will I be able to trip balls?
Do you think psychedelics that I just mentioned earlier have a possibility of going to these same kind of places of exploring ideas that are outside of our more commonplace understanding of the world?
I think so, absolutely. However, I think we have to be really careful about those because young people, or people in general, I should say, absolutely can get hurt by them. I mean, but we get hurt by alcohol. We drive our cars and we kill each other. But psychedelics are really interesting because I know that within the history of our country, we have used psychedelics in various capacities for our military in order to try to stimulate ideas and access places and information that can't be accessed normally. This is all fact.
Yeah, I talked to Matt for like 4 hours, so we ran out of time being able to talk. But I wanted to talk to him about MK Ultra and Ted Kaczynski. There's so many mysterious things there. There's like layers of
MK Ultra,
what's known and what's
Ultra
not
Miami.
known. It's fascinating. But I think what is interesting is psychedelics were used or were attempted to be used as tools of different kinds.
Whoa.
That's the point. So like we think of technology as tools to enable us to do things. And that same way that psychedelics, like many drugs, could be used as tools, some more effective than others.
Absolutely.
I don't think I'm not sure what you can do effectively with alcohol. Although I think somebody commented somewhere on social media that I don't know why everyone is so negative about alcohol, because I think the person said that it's given me some of the most incredible. It enabled me to let go and have some of the most incredible experiences with friends in my life. And it's true. We kind of sometimes say alcohol is dangerous. It can make you do horrible. But the reality is it's also a fascinating tool for letting go of trying to be somebody maybe that you're not, and allowing you to be yourself fully in whatever crazy form that is, and allow you to have really deep and interesting experiences with those you love. So even alcohol can be used as an effective tool for exploring experiences and becoming expanding your mind and becoming a better person. So what the hell was I talking about? So psychedelics and MK Ultra. Is there something interesting to say in our historical use of psychedelics?
I mean, think about it. When did we start doing that? When did we start using those?
That's true. It's quite a long time ago, right?
But true. But when did our government start experimenting with them with us? Okay.
Our government is the United States government.
Yeah. Okay, so that happened in around the 1950s, okay? After, quote unquote, the 1940s, where we have 47 and we have, this Roswell type stuff going on, okay? Yes. Like crash sites and things like that. So I think that, I think there might be a correlation there. I don't know what it is, okay? But I do think...
That's fascinating, actually, yeah. There's a lot of interesting things started
around that time period. Yeah. And so Aldous Huxley would say we opened the doors of perception, Okay, and what flew in?
Oh man, that was beautifully put.
Profoundness. Hey, okay, nice.
What other book?
Yeah, okay, so Hannah Arendt. She is a philosopher that not a lot of people know about. But she was a Jewish woman during the Holocaust, and she was interred at Bergen-Belsen, which was basically Auschwitz for women, and she escaped. She came to the United States, and she had worked with Heidegger, even though he's supposed to be anti-Semitic and a Nazi and everything, but they were lovers, okay? So she comes out, and she's at Columbia University, and she teaches philosophy there. And she writes two books, which I'll recommend. One is called Eichmann in Jerusalem, where she attends the Nuremberg trials. And she basically makes this really astute observation about evil. And she says, Eichmann is one of the people who sent the Jews to the concentration camps, who ran the trains, okay? And she said, the thing about Eichmann was that he didn't seem particularly evil. Actually, he seemed to be quite a nice guy. She said what was interesting about him was he seemed incredibly thoughtless and stupid. And she said, and he used a lot of stereotypes like memes. So she actually wrote about memes before we had them.
Whoa.
And now people just use memes, and they're actually used against us even.
Facts.
There's even a segment of warfare called mimetic warfare. All right? So memes are something that can sway a whole population of people. So she wrote about memes before they were even in existence. And that's Eichmann in Jerusalem. And I think she also has some really amazing things to say about evil, is that when people remain thoughtless, she has another book called The Life of the Mind, which is gigantic, and I don't think anybody will read it. But frankly, it's one of the best books I've ever read, and I've read it many times. And basically, in The Life of the Mind, she asks a very simple question. She says, why do people do bad things? Why are they evil? And what she says is she wonders if she says that bad people sleep well at night, contrary to, you know how the saying,
drugs.
How do you sleep at night? Well, that's only because you're a good person that you're asking that question. Because you actually have a conscience. And a conscience is this dual kind of, you fight with yourself about the consequences of your actions. And she says, bad people don't seem to have a conscience. So they actually sleep well at night. And so she goes through a whole history of philosophy about evil, and that's really a good one too. But I also have to recommend this one too. There's one more. So I know I recommended two, but just from the same philosopher. My friend Jeffrey Kripal, he's at Rice University, and he's in my field, religious studies. He's written several books. He's written a heck of a lot of books. Let's put it that way. But I think his best book, or the one that impacted me the most, is called Authors of the Impossible. And his writing is very much like Nietzsche's writing, in the sense that it's almost as if he reaches out of the pages and he grabs you and he kind of slaps you around and says, think about this, and you can't help but be changed after you've read it. And he's got a great chapter in there about Jacques Vallée.
Oh, so he covers a bunch of different thinkers and authors that are out, that somehow are, renegade in some aspect or revolutionary in some aspect.
Yeah, they're thinking the impossible. There's a great one he's written called Mutants and Mystics, where he talks about the comic strips. Why can't I remember the name of the person? He just died, Stan Lee. He talks about the history of the comics by Stan Lee, and they're all paranormal. They all start off super paranormal, and it's fascinating.
On the topic of Hannah Arendt.
Hannah Arendt.
Oh no, this is horrible.
So I haven't read her work, but I vaguely touched upon sort of commentary of
the whole thing.
Her work, and it seems like some people think her work is dangerous in some aspect. I don't know if you can comment on why that is. It feels like similar with Ayn Rand or something like that.
Yeah.
Where this is, I should say not dangerous, but controversial.
Yes, it is. Yes, they think it's controversial. This is the reason, I believe. I've heard of the controversy. the controversy is that she
Lone
didn't.
Ranger.
First of all, she is Jewish, and she did escape a concentration camp.
Yeah, that's sad.
And
That's
yet
the
she's
part I want to
called.
hear.
She's been called anti-Jewish, and I think part of that was that she basically was saying something that I believe.
She probably got
that
tactics.
A lot of normal people are like Eichmann, and evil things are done by people who just follow the rules,
Lone Ranger.
and they don't think about what they're doing. And that's one of the
Hey,
most
Snowplow,
pernicious
you want trying to hit
forms
this?
of evil of our time.
Yeah, Purple Boy. Mystic Man.
Hey, Joe. Harold's Cheers wide open. Now streaming on Disney Plus. I'm Joe. Look around. This world has so much to offer. Enjoy every minute of it. Disney and Pixar Soul. Rated PG. Now streaming on Disney Plus.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Ernest Becker work and all the philosophies around there about the fear of death and how a fear of our own mortality, or awareness of our own mortality and its fear is, in case of Ernest Becker,
Sponsored by races.
is a significant component.
Ow. Okay.
Whoa. Whoops.
Familiar with the Ernest Becker work and all the philosophies around there about the fear of death and how a fear of our own mortality, or awareness of our own mortality and its fear is, in case of Ernest Becker, is a significant component in the psychology, in the way we humans develop our understanding of the world. So what are your thoughts in the context of religion, or maybe in the context of your own mind, about the role of death in life, or
Ooh.
fear of death in life? And are
Fear
you
God.
afraid of death? Diana,
We cover everything in this
every
podcast.
single topic is covered.
Wow. Okay. I so happen to have benefited, perhaps, from living with an older brother who seemingly had no fear of death while growing up. And he did everything.
Oh, no.
Okay. So he climbed
That's cool.
mountains. He was a rock climber. He jumped out of airplanes. Of course, he had to be a Green Beret and go into the Special Forces, where that type of thing is a requirement, right? And so because of that, I did a lot of things outside of my comfort zone, and which probably I shouldn't have done. And hope to goodness my kids don't do them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, don't die. Oh,
Okay,
don't
so
die.
Do I fear death? I think about death a lot.
Diana
actually.
Walsh.
You may not know
philosopher
this about
Chris
me, but in my field, I was the co-chair of the death panel. It's called the death panel. There was
Black hole.
It's the panel to think about death in religious studies, and I was that for many years.
So you've thought about it a bit.
A bit. Let's see. I think that people are a little too confident, I think, about life in general, that they're going to kind of live all the time and not die. I hate to say it, I'm super positive, and most people would consider me to be too happy almost, right? And so it's odd then that I spend a lot of time thinking about death, but I wonder if there's a connection there.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be alive, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what the thinking about death does, is it makes you appreciate the days that you do have.
Yeah.
It's a weird controversy. I tend to believe that the fact that this life ends gives each day a significant amount of meaning,
Not
So I don't know,
affiliated with any of them.
It seems like an important feature of life. It's not like a bug. It seems like a feature that it has.
Anybody but me,
But it's a
bitches.
strange feature because I wish it, like all the good
America.
stuff, you wish it wouldn't end.
Well, you know what's interesting, Lex, and I do point this out to my students because we cover in a lot of the basic studies courses I teach, we cover all religions or as many as we can, like the major religions. And so you take Hinduism, for example.
Hey.
Now, this is an ancient religion, okay?
Which one?
So you and I are here talking about how we enjoy living and life and things like that. Well, the
Go
goal
there.
of Hinduism is basically never to get reincarnated.
I
It's
freaking
basically
love
to not
India.
live, okay? And to get off samsara, which is the wheel of life and death. So
Escape the whole.
yeah, exactly.
thing.
Think of that. Conditions are so different that you and I and my students are happy to be alive. But they're back in the day, thousands of years ago, when they actually didn't write it, they spoke the Vedas, which were the sacred traditions of India. They wanted off. They didn't want to come back. Life was terrible. That's what people don't have the adequate understanding of history. That for the majority of people, life is
Thank
really
you.
hard, right? And you and I are, and your audience, among the lucky.
Yeah.
That we actually like
6:30.
We want to live.
Most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
This is the new Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic, and it responds to snoring automatically. So no more night
Okay, yo, this is lit right here.
for the couch.
I want a
The Tempur
membership
Ergo
card.
Smart Base is
It goes along with my book, which is basically making the argument that belief in non-human intelligence or ETs or UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, is a new form of religion.
And how does that work with the scientific method? Do you think there's always this role of religion as being, in its broad definition, religion as being a complement to our sort of very rigorous empirical pursuit of understanding reality? Well, there's always going to be this coupling. We'll always redefine new eras of civilization of what that religion actually looks like. So you talk about technology and so on being the modern set of religious beliefs around that. Is that always going
interesting
to
to think
is
about
religion
that a lot.
is religion always going to kind of cover the space of things we can't quite understand with science yet, but we still want to be thinking about?
No, it's
Oh,
dead.
I see what you're saying. That's a great question. When you say religion, I would use the word religiosity because I think that we're moving out of the dogmatic types of religions into more of a, I hate to put it this way, but an X-Files type religion where we can
Baha'i.
say, I want to believe, or the truth is out there,
Right.
but we don't know that it's out there, or we don't know yet what it is, but we know it's out there. So there's
Whatever
this
you can put
this
on
kind of
Tinder.
built-in capacity for belief in something that we don't have evidence for yet, and that's a sort of faith. So I would say yes to that question. Absolutely, I think it's adaptive in that way. We're moving
I
into
do
a new.
not have
I mean, heck, we've already moved into this culture. Most
I got
people have not
roots.
caught up with it yet. I see that in the school systems, and I think that I'm hoping we can catch up
And a
fast.
Sharpie, you want my autograph?
Because really, it's moving faster than we are.
There's an abundance of data now.
Describe me. What does an alien look like me?
Is there some broader understanding
Of
of,
my
how we
heart.
should think about alien intelligences than like little green men
Yes.
that you can maybe elaborate on and talk about?
Yes, this comes directly out of my
Army
research in Catholic history. What I found was that, let's take for instance this idea of an angel. Okay, so we all think we know what an angel looks like. Why? Well, we've been told what an angel looks like. We see what an angel looks like. Throughout history, people have painted angels, and they all look pretty much the same. But
My
actually, if
mom
you go
is
to the
a
primary
ton of
sources on, either in Hebrew or in Greek or, in whatever language, and in Latin, and you look at experiences that people have
Antimatter
talked
pig
about,
Latin.
where they've written down their experiences about angels. Angels don't at all look like what we think they don't look like little cherubs with wings. They don't look like tall, strong, anthropomorphic, human looking things. They don't. They look really weird. And sometimes they don't look at all humanoid. They look like strange spinning things, right? With eyes and things like that. They communicate telepathically with us. Okay, so what does that mean for the idea of extraterrestrials, or what we consider to be aliens? I do think that
I just love when my mom calls me an angel.
First, I'm not the first to say this. If we're in contact with non-human intelligence, we're most likely in contact with its technology. Because think about us. Do we send human beings to Mars yet? Some people say yes, but let's put that aside.
Yeah.
So no, we don't. We use our technology. We send our rovers to Mars. Okay. Okay. So if there's an extraterrestrial civilization, are they coming by themselves? Are they coming to see us? Or are they sending their technology? Most likely they either are technology or they are sending their technology.
Yeah, there might be a gray area between what is technology and what the aliens are.
Yeah.
So, but you're saying basically a robotic probe that would be the equivalent of
I
our
would
our
love
human
to describe
civilization
this
created
not
technology.
Way more advanced than what we could believe to be a probe. All right.
It's kind of funny to think about, if whatever sort of extraterrestrial creations have visited Earth, that we're interacting with some dumb, crappy drone technology.
Yeah, it's true.
And we're building these myths and so on from an experience with some crappy drone made by some crappy startup. When the actual intelligence is something much grander. That's the more likely situation.
That's what I like.
The angel hit first too,
it's
though.
a lot weirder than you think.
Yeah. Oh boy. So, but what forms can it possibly take? So,
okay.
I really love this
I
idea
would love
that,
to be the world.
I tend to be humble in the face of all that we don't know, and I tend to believe that the form alien life forms would take and the way they would communicate is much more likely to be of a form that we can't even comprehend or perhaps can't even perceive directly. So, it could be in the space of, we don't understand most of how our mind works. It could be in the space of whatever the heck consciousness is. Maybe consciousness itself is communication
so well
with aliens, or
no,
I don't know.
I'm 26. I'm philosopher Chris Payne.
Thoughts is actually
come through. Give me help.
Alien life forms communicating. I know all that sounds crazy, but I'm saying I'm just trying to come up with the craziest possible thing that doesn't make any sense that could very well be true, and you can't say it's not true because we don't understand basically anything about our mind. So it could be all of those things, everything from hallucinations, all the things that are explored through the different drugs that we've talked about in this podcast in general. Joe Rogan loves to talk about DMT and all those kinds of hallucinogenic drugs. All of it, including love and fear, all those things. That could be aliens communicating with us. Memes on the internet, that could be... I'm pretty sure humor is alien communication. No, I don't know. But so is there some way that's helpful for you to think about beyond the little green men?
Oh, absolutely. It accords exactly with how I think, actually. So I'll explain. I liked in American Cosmic, I attained the status of full professor. So I was like, okay, I can pretty much write this book like I want to do it. And I did. So I used a lot of quotes from cool artists like David Bowie. Okay, so David Bowie opens the book, okay, and he basically says, and so does Nietzsche, by the way. David Bowie and Nietzsche
Has
Boom,
CDs of
two
them, old,
awesome quotes
never
right together.
listened
That's
to
how I
them.
open
No
my
better
book.
opener.
Also,
Yeah.
Do you remember the quotes?
Yeah, of course.
He
so
died,
the
it was
first quote by
significant.
David Bowie, and that's
I'm
what
not
I
a
concentrate
fucking
on
alien.
in response to what you just said, which I think is absolutely correct.
I just ran out of
David Bowie said the internet is an alien
rolling
life form.
papers.
Okay, and if you've not seen David Bowie's interview where he says that, I highly recommend it. He's so brilliant. Okay, so David Bowie is actually quite brilliant about the idea of UFOs. He's also brilliant about the idea of technology. Okay, and most people wouldn't think that, but I mean, he's pretty darn smart. Okay,
And
so all
Uber.
right, so I started to think about it, and I also early on in my research met Jacques Vallée. Okay, so he's a technologist.
Vallée.
He has a PhD in information technology from computer science, basically from Northwestern, and he got that back in the day. You know, when I say back in the day, I'm not talking 1,000 years ago. I'm talking like in the 60s.
I
Okay,
smoked
so he's
Back when computer science wasn't really even a field
yeah, it
that
wasn't
you can
even
get a
thing.
degree in.
Yeah, he has a PhD in it, and he's French. He's from France, but he lives in Silicon Valley, and he worked on ARPANET, which is the proto-internet. He mapped Mars. He's also an astronomer. I mean, he's just this all-around brilliant guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he's also interested in UFOs. And most people take those two interests of his as separate interests.
Yeah.
And I remember being at a very small conference and listening to him, being in awe, of course, because he's an awe-inspiring person. And then thinking, wait a minute, why do people compartmentalize those two things about him? They're one and the same. Okay, so when we talk about UFOs and UAPs and stuff, we have to talk about digital technology and things like that. Now, if we were going back to if I were to say if I were to believe in, and like I said earlier, I was agnostic, bordering on belief, most likely a believer, in this extraterrestrial or not extraterrestrial, let me put it another way, non-human intelligence that's communicating with us. I'm going to tell you how I think they communicate with us. And I go back to the Greeks again, okay? And the Greeks had this idea of muses. You know the muses? So there are these things called muses, and we tend to think of them as metaphors, right? But what if they're not? What if they're actually non-human intelligence trying to communicate with us, but we're so stupid we can't understand? So only people with in super amazing capacities, like poetic, creative, intelligent, mathematical, whatever, because they tend to do this symbolically. They tend to communicate with us in symbols form. And so music, symbols, we've got math that are, it's a symbolic language. And so muses are probably a good idea for me of what this would be. Now, would muses have spaceships, or those things that we call physical counterparts to what they are? That's another question altogether.
One time, my dad took me to this jazz club. It's like this guy floats off this.
Yeah.
What do you think beliefs are in themselves can become reality? I mean, so you've now adapted in this little bit of a conversation, adapted the metaphysician view of reality, which is the physics.
Yes.
But, we humans kind of operate in the space of ideas.
I don't even
very
have a
much
stem, though. It hurts.
Like, we've kind of, in the collective intelligence of human beings, have come up with a set of ideas that persist in the minds of these many people, and they become quite strong and powerful. Like, in terms of, impact on our lives, they can have sometimes more impact than this table does, than the physics.
Yeah,
And in that sense, is there some sense in which our beliefs are reality, even if they're not connected to the physics?
Yes, even if they're not real. Yeah, even if, so yes, absolutely. So our beliefs are tremendously, they create social effects, absolutely. There was a belief that, I'm going to use this example. There was a belief back in the day, and we're talking about, when I say back in the day, I'm a historian, so I'm talking about 1,000 years ago, right? That women had no souls. Okay, so look, I don't know if human beings have souls.
So you're not
I can tell you this, though, that if human beings have souls, probably animals do too. That's my own personal belief. That's not a professor belief there. But there was this belief among the Catholic magisterium, which runs Europe, that women had no souls, so they had to have this big meeting about it. You know, did women have souls? But that belief had consequences for women. I mean, women were treated and have been treated as if they didn't have souls. Okay, so there's.
And the soul was really the essence of the human being.
It was. It's called the animus, right? It's what is the essence of what is. It's eternal. You know, women weren't eternal. Here's another example. Okay, this is an example from my own research. All right, so there in the Catholic tradition, there's this idea of purgatory, hell, and heaven, and these are three destinations that people can go to when they die. Yes. And if you're great, you go to heaven automatically and you're considered a saint. If you're okay, you go to purgatory, right? And you suffer for a time and then get back into heaven. If you're terrible, you go to hell, right? Okay.
I don't think kids watching this now.
That the Catholics determined, and this was a belief for a long time, like 1,000 years or more. And it was called limbo, all right? And
Yo, I played that game on my MacBook. No way.
Edge. And it was either on the edge of hell or on the edge of heaven. No one really could determine which it was. No historians are like, well, this person says it was on the edge of heaven. Well, listen about it. You know, did women have souls? But that belief had consequences for women. I mean, women were treated and have been treated as if they didn't have souls. Okay, so there's.
And the soul was really the essence of the human being.
It was. It's called the animus, right? It's what is the essence of what is. It's eternal. You know, women weren't eternal. Here's another example.
My problem.
Okay, this is an example from my own research.
It's not that hard to
All right,
agree.
so there in the Catholic tradition, there's this idea of purgatory, hell, and heaven, and these are three destinations that people can go to when they die, and if you're great, you go to heaven automatically and you're considered a saint. If you're okay, you go to purgatory, right? And you suffer for a time and then get back into heaven. If you're terrible, you go to hell, right? Okay. Well, there was a place that the Catholics determined, and this was a belief for a long time, like 1,000 years or more, and it was called limbo, all right? And limbo comes from the Latin limbus, and it means edge. And it was either on the edge of hell or on the edge of heaven. No one really could determine which it was. No historians are like, well, this person says it was on the edge of heaven. Well, listen, this was a terrible, first of all, there is no limbo anymore. In 2007, Benedict, the then Pope, got rid of the idea that there was limbo. Okay, so Catholics kind of went crazy.
Did he really?
Because they didn't really know, they forgot that limbo existed.
I know they talked about adding another.
And they said, how could you get rid of purgatory?
Another demon.
But actually, he just got rid of this idea of limbo.
Oh, so that's a distinct thing from purgatory.
It was.
And by the way, people should know they have a book on purgatory that came before.
American Cosmic. Yes, I wrote a book on purgatory. Yeah.
Anyway, so limbo is a distinct thing from purgatory.
Yeah, and the types of people who go to limbo happen to be virtuous pagans, okay, like Socrates or somebody like that, and children who weren't baptized. So think of this. Think of for like more than 1,000 years, mothers and fathers gave birth to babies who weren't baptized and couldn't be buried with their family in these burial, and you know they couldn't be reunited with them in heaven. Think of the pain and suffering that caused, and that was nothing. Yeah. Limbo's nothing. Yet the belief in it caused untold suffering, and that's just a small example.
And that was as real to them.
It was absolutely real.
For the untold time.
The events were real, let's put it that way. The place itself,
I'm chiming in because I'm lit.
Do you think they really believed it?
They totally believed it.
As much as the table is real?
Yes. I've read, but listen, we have trigger warnings today, right? So don't read this. It's going to make you upset, okay? Yeah. History, primary sources, no trigger warnings, okay? Yeah. So you're going through, like, you know, somebody's diary from 1400 and you hear the suffering and pain that they went through. There were times in my research where I'd have to put my primary source down, you know, and just basically go outside and take a walk
funny.
Because it was so horrific. I knew it was true because they wouldn't write something, you know, they're not going to write in their diary something that's not true, and it was horrible. So yes, these people went through untold suffering for nothing, for, you know, because they had an erroneous belief, but they didn't know it was erroneous.
So it's real to them.
Yeah.
The course that MIT is offering with NASA, Boeing, and other partners.
So you mentioned building blocks.
Yeah.
You didn't mention the word God.
No, in the last one. That's
or
why I
sort
was
of
just
the
dumbfounded.
afterlife. Are those essential to the myth? So there's a contact experience. Is there some other aspects of myth and religion which makes them viral? Which makes them spread and captivate the imagination
Why would I do that?
of people?
Why would I do this, sir?
Yes. Is there a pattern to them? I think that for each era, it's different. And people have. First, let's talk about the definition of religion.
What
if
is
that's
them?
Because most people assume the definitions that we in the West are familiar with, which is that, that of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, monotheistic religions. And those are just some religions. There are so many different types of religions. Some religions have no God at all. Zen Buddhism, for example, is a religion that asks you to take away your belief structures, in fact, I would call that a Kantian type religion, right? Yeah. In that it's basically telling you to get rid of your concepts of what you think about things so that you can actually have the experience, like you were talking about earlier, of the thing in itself. And they call that Satori. So there are people who believe, they call it meditation, Zen meditation. And it's fairly radical, actually. In some monasteries, I don't know if they still do this, but they'll whack you on the head if you appear to be not focusing and, that kind of thing. They do things to basically take you away from your conceptions of reality and bring you into a state of all that is, which is what they call Satori. And that has nothing to do with God.
I like this religion. And anything that involves sticks and whacking in order for you to focus better, I'm gonna have to join a monastery. So digging into definitions of religion. So what do you think is the
dude I met
that defines a religion?
He would always just walk around
So
campus
in
with
my
dog
field, we have
treats and give them to
a few
dogs.
different definitions of religion,
monk.
as you
I
can
made a
imagine,
graph
just like
about 'em.
philosophers have different definitions of what is real. So I take this definition, and it comes from John Livingston. And it's,
Real? God,
religion is
what?
that set of beliefs and practices that is inspired by a transformative, what is perceived actually to be a transformative and sacred power.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. So religion is a set of, it's not just belief, it's also practices. It's both belief and practices.
I have not
You
even
have practices
spoke
without
about
the belief.
this
So you have
topic.
those together, okay? And it's inspired by what is perceived, because we don't know if it's real or not, what is perceived to be of sacred and transforming power.
So perceived by the followers,
Yeah.
or is this connected to the original sort of experience?
No. It's perceived by the followers.
That's a really good definition. So, and that's the governing idea, is
No, I
that
could be
there's
cool all the
something
time.
of
I'm
great
just
power,
high.
Yes.
perceived to be of great power, to which you can connect yourself either emotionally or intellectually somehow.
I can
in order
channel
to
some real
explore the
cool
world
shit.
that is beyond your own capabilities.
Yes.
And is there communication also involved? Or
Generally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great definition. Okay, so within that falls everything that we've talked about so far. including
Communication
technology,
involved with the. I'm not communicating.
alien life, and so on. Well, can we actually talk about the suffering?
Sure.
The darkest parts of writing a book. So
Who's writing
let's
the
go to
book?
the full Michael Malice, Stephen King mode of what are the darkest moments of writing this book, and what is it? Maybe start with the
I'm not
white
even
pill.
writing anything.
What's the idea? What's the hope? And what are your darkest moments around writing this book?
So, people are familiar with the red pill and the blue pill. They're from the Matrix. The red pill is the idea that what is presented as fact by the corporate press and entertainment industry is in fact a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep some very unpleasant people in power and everyone else under control. And one of my expressions is you take one red pill, not the whole bottle.
Yes.
Because at a certain point you think everything's a lie, and then you're kind of no capacity for distinguishing truths.
You're full of good one-liners.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm full of something, that's for sure. And what I saw in this space is a lot of these red pill people got very disheartened and cynical. And one of my big heroes is Albert Camus, and he said the worst thing is cynicism. And that's something called the
pills medicine,
which is the idea that it's just we're waiting for the end. It's hopeless, and I don't see it that way at all. And I'm like, all right, I have to address this, and not just with some kind of cheerleading. Everything's gonna be great, guys. Here is why I am positive, and not that I'm positive the good guys are gonna win, but I'm positive the good guys can win. And that's all you need. Because if your, God forbid, kid is kidnapped and there's a 10% chance that you can save them, you're not going to be like, well, I don't like those odds. This is your country. This is your values. This is your family. And I think it's much more than 10%. And even if you lose, you will take pride in that you did everything in your power to win. So,
is there a good definition of good guys? In the sense that
the ones who wear white.
There's layers to this. You're like modern day Shakespeare. Is there a danger in thinking Adolf Hitler was probably pretty confident that he led a group of good guys?
Listen, if Hitler did anything wrong, why isn't he in jail? My Czech friend thought of that joke. He says in his accent, he goes, if Hitler's so bad, why isn't he in the jail?
That's a good point. He's probably still alive, right?
And look, yeah, hopefully.
Oh, boy.
Out of the bad
Two
guys
of the three
don't go
people
to-
listening to this are very upset right now. Because there's a bunch of people who've been reaching out to me trying to get me to write a book, which is ridiculous.
Why?
Is that what I should
There's
do?
people who are brilliant folks like you, like Jordan Peterson, that I think have a lot of knowledge to share with the world.
Okay.
I think what
You're
I
Jordan
feel
Peterson?
I can contribute to the world in terms of impact is to build something.
Okay.
Meaning like engineering stuff.
Okay.
Like a book.
Book has to be engineered, and I'm not using that loosely. You have to engineer a book.
No, for sure. What I mean is like literally a product with programming and artificial intelligence.
write
All
books
this.
about me.
I want to build a company. I want to because I have a few ideas that I feel I'm equipped. And it has to do with your like intuition about the way you can build a better world. You individually, like what can you add to the world that's a positive thing?
Or maybe
And
I'll
for
write
me,
books.
I feel like the maximal thing I can add to the world is at least to attempt to build products that would add more love in the world. And like, so I want to focus on that. The danger of the book for me, or any kind of writing,
Paper.
and even this podcast is a
Digital.
little bit dangerous for me, is like,
Audio.
It's
Audio?
fun for sure.
Philosopher Chris Payne, Jordan Peterson.
It's fun. It's
Lex
like
Freeman.
it takes you into this place where you
Surprise
start thinking
Jordan.
about the world. You start enjoying and playing with ideas. You start, and like just your book on Dear Reader,
Hey.
but also the new write. Like clearly, you and I probably think similarly in the sense that you did a lot of work.
Yes. This next book is killing me.
Yeah, as you mentioned often, it's clear, like on your YouTube channel, which I'm a fan of, it just comes out like you mention all of these books that you're reading. It just comes through you that you're suffering through this, and it changes you, and it's clear that you're thinking deeply about the world because of this book. And I feel like if you do that, that's like when I first came to this country, I read the book The Giver. I need to read it again. It's like the red pill thing is it changes you in where you can never be the same person again.
Sure.
And I feel about a book in that same way. The moment you write a book, of course it depends on the book. I could also just write like in my field a very technical book.
No, that's a terrible idea.
Yes, but that's okay. That doesn't really change you. That's just like sharing information. But like something where you're like, how do I think about this world? Can you just leave that behind you?
I get it, dude. It's being pregnant. It never escapes your brain. I'm telling you. You're absolutely right.
One time, my dad took me to this jazz club. It's like this guy floats off.
Is there something you could say about the physical proximity and the chance collisions? Like we live in this
Red Bull
time of the pandemic where everyone is maybe trying to see the silver lining and accepting the remote nature of things. Is there one of the things that people like faculty that I talk to miss is the procrastination, like the chance to like everything is about.
I really enjoy Nietzsche. Okay, so anything by Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. He's a philosopher. I actually hated him when I first read him in my early 20s.
That's like the opposite of most people's experience, right? They usually love them in their 20s and then they throw them to the curb.
Later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's totally misrepresented and misinterpreted.
He grew on you.
Well, it happened in one night. So let me just describe it because it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It happened on New Year's. So I had friends when I was in my 20s, and they kept telling me, you have to read Nietzsche, you have to read Nietzsche. And I tried, okay? But again, no, I didn't I was not into how he described the philosophical concepts he was trying to get across. So, but they weren't giving up. I have very persistent friends. So one of them gave me The Gay Science, and I had it on my book stand, and it was New Year's Eve, and I'm actually not a big part. I'm actually an introvert. I'm a geeky introvert. Okay,
The Gay
so
Science.
I don't go out and party a lot. It was New Year's Eve. Even that couldn't get me out to go party. So I just wanted to go to bed.
Yeah.
And New Year's Eve hit, and everybody went out, and I was asleep, and they woke me up. And I was like, darn, they woke me up. Might as well read this book by Nietzsche. Okay, so I picked it up, and lo and behold, I turned to a page that was exactly about, it was called Sanctus Januarius, which is basically Saint January, and it was about New Year's Eve. And I thought, whoa, what a weird coincidence. And it was it was also super Catholic, and it was a really beautiful little aphorism. It's actually a book of aphorisms, which are kind of religious, right? And so it's religious. The genre is religious, let's put it that way, but he's not. So basically he says, today is the day when people are supposed to make these resolutions, right? And he says, from here on out, I will never say no. I will only say yes, okay? I look away. If something's horrible, I'll just look away from it. I won't get angry at it. And then he also says, I will be like Saint January. And Saint January is actually the saint whose blood is in this place in Italy. I think it's in Italy, and every year it turns to blood again. So it's like it's desiccated. So it's this miracle. Whoa. It says, my blood is now it flows again. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. And I said, and a strange coincidence because it just turned 12. So it's like New Year's Eve. I pick up the book. I read this aphorism. I said, strange coincidence. That, and then I turn the page. And the page is about coincidences. And I was like, I shut it. And I thought, this is weird. And I felt like they was alive. I felt like the book was alive and Nietzsche was speaking to it, right? I had a experience and engagement with Nietzsche.
Yeah.
And so after that, I couldn't put his stuff down. It was engaging, fascinating, everything. So yeah, so that's one book, The Gay Science.
What did you pick up from the Gay Science or from Nietzsche in general?
Yeah,
Is there some ideas that kinda...
The idea is basically that truth. He's got awesome one-liners. You know, so truth is a woman. So okay, what is
No, I'm just pissed I haven't gotten Rome papers yet.
Truth is a woman. Basically, she's gonna lie to you. She looks real attractive, but she's not gonna tell you the truth.
Oh, Nietzsche. Yeah.
So basically, I'm not saying that that's true about women. I'm obviously a woman. So what he's saying is that truth is not is like what I said. Brother Guy said it's a moving target. Okay, we started this whole conversation with what's real, right? So I should have just gone straight to Nietzsche. Haven't not you heard truth is a woman? You know,
a moving target.
Okay, so truth is a woman.
What?
Yeah. All right, so that and you know Foucault, this other philosopher, French philosopher, actually takes up this idea and creates his own framework called genealogy from it. So the genealogy of morals, so that we only believe certain things and we sediment them into truth. So we say it, you know, a truth told. Who said that? Was it Lenin or Stalin? A truth told enough times. I mean, a lie told enough times becomes the truth.
Yeah.
So that's basically Nietzschean right there. Okay. So that's Nietzsche. So Nietzsche also is a huge critic of Christianity, which I'm actually Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic. So I appreciated his critique. I thought it was actually quite accurate. He's a critique of religion in general. And he's fascinating. And also, I find that he talks about altered states of consciousness, and he calls them elevated states. And I think through his book, you can actually experience elevated states. So, yeah, Nietzsche.
T-Mobile is...
We back with it.
You know, can we actually, I mean, I think you're asking me that question that Kant basically was trying to get at was, can we know the thing in itself? Can we know that? Can we have like some kind of like intense knowing of it? It's almost mystical. And I would say that...
Knowing of what?
That's where religion comes in. Okay, that's where we talk about religion. And if I may also go back to Immanuel Kant, this idea that he... just before he died, just as he died, he was working on, he did this critique of reason where basically he believed, he basically talks about, can we know what's real? And he basically has this long, you know, the question, can we know what's real? And then, you know, 1,000 pages later, no. I'll just give you the rundown, okay? So, okay,
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. Then he does this other critique, and okay, so he does like 3 critiques. Then he does this critique of judgment. Okay, well, judgment is this other thing altogether, and I think that that's what you're getting at. So how do
you want me to violate you guys and everybody
really
else?
Intensely and intimately, and I think that he thought that judgment was the idea that we can actually know the thing in itself, and he was working on that as he died, and then he never finished it. Hannah Arendt, another philosopher of the 20th century, took up the critique of judgment, and tried to finish it.
Oh, why the word judgment?
Because judgment, think about it. When you see a work of art, who judges that to be decent? Okay, so there is a group of people who come to the decision that that's rotten, or, you know, that's pretty good. You know, like, I noticed that you like to play guitar. Well, you choose music that I happen to like too, okay? So you and I both have a, you know, sense of judgment. It's a sense. So he said there's a sense that some people have. Why do certain communities have a similar sense? What dictates that? And so he was working on that. He thought it had something to do with the knowledge, the intimate knowledge of the thing in itself. Yeah. So another philosopher that philosophers
Hannah.
actually don't like at all, but religious studies people do, is Martin Heidegger. So Martin Heidegger has some great essays. One is called "What is a Work of Art?" And again, he gets to, he talks about Van Gogh and Van Gogh's shoes. You know that picture, the painting Van Gogh's shoes? It's really a really intense picture. It's just shoes. It's, but it's an amazing painting of shoes. And I think everybody can agree that's a cool picture of shoes, right? And so why? The question is, why is that a cool picture of shoes? What kind of knowledge are we accessing to determine that indeed that works, right? And in fact, we still like it.
So basically, the nature of knowledge and what does it represent? It can operate in the space of as detached from reality, or can it ultimately represent reality? I guess that's the space of metaphysics. Is that the
yeah. So what can we know is actually called epistemology.
Epistemology.
But metaphysics is
I guess.
is basically what is the nature of reality.
Right, and those intersect.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah. A lot of things intersect in philosophy. We just have fancy names for them.
Can we take a slight tangent on that
Sure.
on this topic of? It sounds like maybe you could speak to the
You
bigger
guys could
picture. It
link
sounds
up.
like you're quite self-critical.
Who, Charles?
No, you.
Oh, I think
Okay,
I can do better. I can do better. I'll try me again. I'll do better.
Hey guys, nice to meet you.
Self-critical.
Philosopher Chris Payne.
Yeah, that was like a 3 out of 10 response. So let's try to work it up to 5 and 6. I remember Marvin Minsky said on a video interview something that the key to success in academic research is to hate everything you do.
Oh.
For some reason,
I think I followed that because I hate everything he's done.
More
that's
info
a
into
good
the
line.
black hole.
That's-
Yeah.
Maybe that's a keeper. But
But do you find that resonates with you at all in how you think about talks and so on?
I would say it differently. It's not.
No,
that.
not really.
That's such an MIT view of the world, though. So I remember talking about this when, as a
MIT.
student. You were basically told, "I will clean it up for the." purpose
Where's
of the
he from?
podcast."
Does he got rivalry?
My work is crap. My work is crap. My work is crap. My work is crap. Then you go to a conference or something. You're like, everybody else's work is crap. Everybody else's work is crap. And you feel better and better about it.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, and then you sort of keep working on it. I don't hate my work.
That resonates with me.
Yes, I've never hated my work, but I have
What do you do
been
for work?
dissatisfied with it. And I think being dissatisfied, being okay with the fact that you've taken a positive step, the derivative's positive, maybe even the second derivative's positive. That's important because that's a part of the hope, right? But you have to, but I haven't gotten there yet. If that's not there, that I haven't gotten there yet, then, it's hard to move forward, I think. So I buy that, which is a little different from hating everything that you do.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that I've done that I like better than
I'm
I like
philosopher
myself.
Chris Payne.
So it's separating me from the work.
With a new
essentially.
friend.
So I think I am very critical of myself, but sometimes the work I'm really excited about, and sometimes I think it's
Does
kind
that
of
happen
good.
right away? So I found the work that I've liked, that I've done, most of it, I liked it in retrospect more when I was far away from it in time.
I have to be fairly excited about it to get done.
No, excited at the time, but then happy with the result. But years later, or even I might go back, you know what? That actually turned out to matter.
Yeah.
That turned out to matter. Or, oh gosh, it turns out I've been thinking about that. It's actually influenced all the work that I've
You
done
have a
since
really good voice,
without
man.
realizing it.
Boy,
Because
that
it
guy
comes
was
to the moment.
smart.
Yeah, that guy had a future. Yeah.
Have I heard you before? Who is this?
I think there's so I think there's something to it. I think there's something to the idea. You've got to hate what you do, but it's not quite hate. It's just being unsatisfied.
Lit man.
And different people motivate themselves differently. I don't happen to motivate myself with self-loathing. I happen to motivate myself with something else.
So you're able to sit back and be proud of, in retrospect, of the work you've done.
Well, and it's easier
just
when you
meet
can
new
connect
friends.
with other people because then you can be proud of them.
Proud of the people.
I am proud of
And
you
then the
guys.
And then you
question
can
is,
still safely hate yourself.
Yeah, that's right. It's win-win, Michael, or at least
No
win-lose,
way.
which is what you're looking for.
Oh, wow.
54.
There's so many brilliant lines in this.
There's levels.
Discover Life Cuisine. Meals that fit your lifestyle. Your high protein life.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say this? I think I'm allowed to say this. I've eaten shrooms a couple times, but I haven't gone the full. I'm talking to a few researchers in psychedelics.
No,
it's an interesting scientifically place. Like, what is the portal you're entering when you take psychedelics? Or another way to ask is like dreams.
To research?
So let me tell you what I think, which is based on nothing. Like, this is based on my life, right? So I don't.
Your intuition.
It's based on my. I'm guessing now. Based on what I do know. But I think that. Well, think about what happens. So your brain's running this internal model, and it's all outside of your awareness. You feel the products, but you don't sense you have no awareness of the mechanics of it, right? It's going on all the time. And so one thing that's going on all the time that you're completely unaware of is that when your brain is basically asking itself, figuratively speaking, not literally, right? Like, how is given the last time I was in this sensory array with this stuff going on in my body, and this chain of events which just occurred, what did I do next? What did I feel next? What did I see next? And so it doesn't come up with one answer. It comes up with a distribution of possible answers, and then there has to be some selection process. And so you have a network in your brain, a subnetwork in your brain, a population of neurons that helps to choose. I'm not talking about a homunculus in your brain or anything silly like that. This is not the soul, it's not the center of yourself or anything like that, but there is a set of neurons that weighs the probabilities and helps to select or narrow the field, okay? And that network is working all the time. It's actually called the control network, the executive control network, or you can call it a frontoparietal, because the regions of the brain that make it up are in the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. There are also parts that belong to the subcortical parts of your brain. It doesn't really matter. The point is that there is this network, and it is working all the time. Whether or not you feel in control, whether or not you feel like you're expending effort, doesn't really matter. It's on all the time, except when you sleep. When you sleep, it's a little bit relaxed. And so think about what's happening when you sleep. When you sleep, the external world recedes, the sense data so basically your model becomes a little bit, the tethers from the world are loosened. And this network, which is involved in, maybe weeding out unrealistic things, is a little bit quiet. So your dreams are really your internal model that's unconstrained by the immediate world. So you can do things that you can't do in real life in your dreams, right? You can fly. Like for example, when I fly on my back in a dream, I'm much faster than when I fly on my front. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But
when you're laying on your back in your dream?
No. When I'm in my dream and flying in a dream, I am much faster flyer in the air.
Fly often?
Not often, but
you talk about it like I don't think I've flown for many years.
Well, you must try it.
I've flown. I've fallen.
That's scary.
Yeah, but you're talking about like
airplane. I fly in my dreams, and I'm way faster, right?
On your back.
On my back, way faster. Now you can say, well, you never flew in your life, right? It's conceptual combination. I mean, I've flown in an airplane, and I've seen birds fly, and I've watched movies of people flying, and I know Superman probably flies. I don't know if he flies faster on his back, but
he's I've never seen
flying on his front, right? But
so.
Yeah. But anyways, my point is that all of this stuff really, all these experiences really become part of your internal model. The thing is that when you're asleep, your internal model is still being constrained by your body. Your brain's always attached to your body. It's always receiving sense data from your body. You're mostly never aware of it unless you run up the stairs or maybe you are ill in some way. But you're mostly not aware of it, which is a really good thing, because if you were, you know, you'd never pay attention to anything outside your own skin ever again. Like right now, you seem like you're sitting there very calmly, but you have a virtual
whole thing going
drama, right?
I'm
It's
ready
like
to go.
like an opera going on inside your body. And so I think that one of the things that happens when people take psilocybin or take, ketamine, for example, is that the tethers are completely removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And then, but
And that's why it's helpful to have a guide, right? Because the guide is giving you sense data to steer that internal model so that it doesn't go completely off the rails.
yeah, no, there's again that wiring to the other brain. That's the guide. Is at least a tiny little tether.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we brought up consciousness a few times. There's several things I want to kind of disentangle there. So one, you recently wrote a paper titled "Consciousness, Religion, and Gurus: Pitfalls of Psychedelic Medicine." So that's one side of it. You've kind of already mentioned that these terms can be a little bit misused or used in a variety of ways that they can be confusing. But in a specific way, as much as we can be specific about these things, about the actual hard problem of consciousness or understanding what is consciousness, this weird thing that it feels like something to experience things. Have psychedelics given you some kind of insight on what is consciousness? You've mentioned that it feels like psychedelics allows you to kind of dismantle your sense of self. Like step outside of yourself.
No.
So that feels like somehow playing with this mechanism of consciousness. And if it is in fact playing with the mechanism of consciousness using just a few chemicals, it feels like we're very much in the neighborhood of being able to maybe understand the actual biological mechanisms of how consciousness can emerge from the brain.
So yeah, there's a bunch there. I think my preface is that
Who's this?
I certainly have opinions that are outside that I can say here are my best speculations as just a person and an armchair philosopher, and it's that philosophy is certainly not my training and my expertise. So I have thoughts there, but that I recognize are completely in the realm of speculation, that are like things that I would love to wrap empirical science around, but that are, there's no data and getting to the hard problem, like no conceivable way, even though I'm very open, like I'm hoping that problem can be cracked. And I as an armchair philosopher, I do think that is a problem. I don't think it can be dismissed, as some people argue it's not even really a problem. It strikes me that explaining just the existence of phenomenal consciousness is a problem. So anyway, I very much keep that divide in mind when I talk about these things, what we can really say about what we've learned through science, including by psychedelics, versus like what I can speculate on in terms of the nature of reality and consciousness. But in terms of, by and large, skeptically, I have to say, psychedelics have not really taught us anything about the nature of consciousness. I'm hopeful that they will. They have been used around certain, I don't even know if features is the right term, but things that are called consciousness.
Tools,
so consciousness can refer to not only just phenomenal consciousness, which is like, you know, the source of the hard problem and what it is to be like Nagel's description, but the sense of self, which can be sort of like the experiential self moment to moment, or it can be like the narrative self, the stringing together of stories. So those are things that I think can be, and a little bit's been done with psychedelics regarding that, but I think there's far more potential. So like one story that unfolded is that psychedelics acutely have an effects on the default mode network, a pattern of activation amongst a subset of brain areas that is associated with self-referential processing. Seems to be more active, more communication between these areas, like the posterior cingulate cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex, for example, being parts of this that are, and others that are tied with sort of thinking about yourself, remembering yourself in the past, projecting yourself into the future. And so that it's an interesting story emerged when it was found that when psilocybin is on board, you know, in the person's system, that there's less communication amongst these areas. So with resting state fMRI imaging, that there's less synchronization or presumably communication between these areas. And so I think has been overstated in terms of, we see this is the dissolving of the ego. This is it. The story made a whole lot of sense, but there's several. I think that story is really being challenged. Like one, we see increasing number of drugs that decouple that network, including ones like that aren't psychedelic. So this may just be a property, frankly, of being like, you know, screwed up. You know, like you know, being out of your head, being like you know.
Anytime you mess with a perceptual system, maybe it screws up some just our ability to just function in the holistically like we do in order, for the brain to perceive stuff, to be able to map it to memory, to connect things together, the whole recur mechanism that could just be messed with
right.
Drugs.
And it couldn't. I'm speculating. It could be tied to more if you had to download them in language, everyday language, like not feeling like yourself.
I downloaded
so whether that be like
LSD
really drunk or really hopped up
077.
on amphetamine or, you know, on like we found it like decoupling in the default mode network on Salvinorin A, which is a smokable psychedelic, which is a non-classic psychedelic, but another one where like DMT, where people are often talking to entities and that type of thing. That was a really fun study to run. But nonetheless, most people say it's not a classic psychedelic and doesn't have some of those phenomenal features that people report from classic psychedelics, and not sort of the clear sort of ego loss type, not at least not in the way that people report it with classic psychedelics. So you get it with all these different drugs, and so and then you also see just broad changes in network activity with other networks, and so I think that story took off a little too soon. Although, so I think in the story that the DMN, the default mode network, relating to the self. And I know some neuroscientists, it drives them crazy if you say that it's the ego. It's like, but self-referential processing, if you go that far, like that was already known before psychedelics. Psychedelics didn't really contribute to that. The idea that this type of brain network activity.
In 5 seconds, you can skip this ad. What you can't skip is climate change. But there is something you can do right now.
What? Climate change? It's always changing.
Is there something general to say about
the climate is always changing?
What the psychedelics do to the human mind? You mentioned kind of an ego loss experience. In the space of Venn diagrams, if we were to like draw a big circle, what can we say about that big circle?
In terms of people's report of subjective experience, probably one of the most general things we can say is that it expands that range. So many people come out of these sessions saying that they didn't know it was possible to have an experience like that.
So there's an emphasis on the subjective experience. That is there words that people put to it that capture that experience, or is it something that just has to be experienced?
It just has to be.
Yeah, people like.
As a researcher, that's an interesting question because you have to kind of measure the effects of this, and how do you convert that into numbers?
Right.
That's the ultimate challenge. So how is that possible? To one, convert it into words, and the second, convert the words into numbers somehow.
So we do a lot of that with questionnaires, some of which are very psychometrically validated. So lots of numbers have been crunched on them. There's always a limitation with questionnaires. I mean, subjective effects are subjective effects. Ultimately, it's what the person is reporting, and that doesn't necessarily point towards a ground truth.
I can work.
So, for example, if someone says that they felt like they touched another dimension, or they felt like they sensed the reality of God, or if they,
right.
What
about these things?
I mean, just you name it. People's ontological views can sometimes shift. I think that's more about where they're coming from, and I don't think it's the quintessential way in which they work. There's plenty of people that hold on to a completely naturalistic viewpoint and have profound and
where would I go and do
experiences
psychedelic research
with these
though?
compounds.
You guys have any idea?
But the subjective effects can be so broad.
No, I'm not.
That
I'm
for
not
some
even trying
people
to do
it
this.
shifts their viewpoint more towards idealism, more towards thinking of that the nature of reality might be more about consciousness than about material. That's a domain I'm very interested in. Right now we have essentially zero to say about that in terms of validating those types of claims, but it's even interesting just to see what people say along those lines.
So you're interested in saying, like, can we more rigorously study this process of expansion? Like, what do we mean by this expansion of your sense of what is possible in the experiences in this world?
Right, as much as what we can say about that through naturalistic psychology.
Right.
Especially as much as we can root it to solid psychological constructs and solid neuroscientific constructs.
Did you know that the average adult has 5 to 20 pounds of toxic poop in their body at any given moment?